Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call Gareth Jenkins, please?
Yes.
I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. My name is Jason Beer and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you give us your full name, please?
My name is Gareth Idris Jenkins.
Thank you.
Mr. Beer, before you go any further, is it appropriate for me to direct Mr. Jenkins about self-incrimination?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jenkins, I'm sure you've been advised, but under our law, a witness at a public inquiry has the right to decline to answer a question put to him by any of the lawyers involved in the inquiry or by me if there is a risk that the answer to that question would incriminate you. This legal principle is known in shorthand form as the privilege against self-incrimination. I've decided that fairness demands that I remind you of that principle before you give your evidence. I must stress to you, however, that it is for you to make it clear to me that in respect of any question put to you, it is your wish to rely upon the privilege. If therefore any questions are put to you by anyone who is asking you questions, which you do not wish to answer on the ground that to answer such a question might incriminate you, you must tell me immediately after such question is put. At that point, I will consider your objection to answering the question and thereafter rule upon whether your objection should be upheld. I know that you are legally represented. No doubt if the issue relating to self-incrimination arises, your lawyers will assist you. And if at any stage during the questioning you wish to consult your lawyers about the privilege, you must tell me so that I can consider whether that is appropriate. Do you understand all that, Mr. Jenkins?
Yes, I understand, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Beer.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jenkins, you've made 5 witness statements to the inquiry. Thank you very much for making those witness statements and for attending today and over the next 3 days to give evidence. Can we start, please, with your witness statements?
Yes.
If we can start with the 5th witness statement, please, which was in fact a witness statement you made only yesterday. It's WITN 0046 0500.
Yes.
Have you got that witness statement in front of you?
I have indeed.
It's 3 pages long, and it consists of 3 pages of corrections to your previous witness statements. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Is that your signature on the 3rd page?
It is.
And are the contents of that your 5th witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. Can we go to your 1st witness statement then, please, which is WITN 0046 0100. It's dated the 6th of February 2023 and is 15 pages long.
Yes.
Have you got that?
I have got that.
And is your signature on page 15?
It is.
And are the contents of that witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. Can we go to your 2nd witness statement, please? WITN 0046 0200, dated the 1st of June 2023, which is 67 pages long. Is that your signature on page 67?
Yes, it's actually slightly longer because it's got an appendix at the end, but
Yes,
that's my signature on page 67, yes, sir.
I'm only dealing with the body of the statement rather than the additions at the end, which are exhibit sheets, essentially.
Right. Yes.
With the corrections that you made in statement 5 brought into account, are the contents of that, your 2nd witness statement, true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Can we deal with your 3rd witness statement, please? 21st of March 2024, 0046 0300, 234 pages long.
Yes,
Is that your signature on page 234?
it is.
And with the corrections in Statement 5 brought into account, are the contents of that witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. And then lastly, Statement 4, 29th of April 2024, 00460400, 83 pages long. Is that your witness? Is that your signature on page 83 of the witness statement?
It is.
And with the corrections in Statement 5 brought into account, are the contents of that your fourth witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you very much. They can be put to one side now. Any further references I give you will come up on the screen.
Okay.
Those witness statements, all 5 of them, will be uploaded to the inquiry's website. They're a substantial body of evidence, and therefore I'm not going to refer to all parts of them when asking you questions. Additionally, you've exhibited to your witness statement a very large number of documents, and you have been provided by the inquiry with still further documents over the last year and a half, and you and your legal representatives have had access to the inquiry's relativity database. I think all of that has resulted in you seeing a very large volume of material, is that right?
Indeed.
And if at any time you want me to stop or to slow down when considering a document, then please do say so.
Thank you.
Can I start with your background, please? I think you graduated in 1973 from university, Cambridge University, with a degree in mathematics.
That's correct.
And upon graduation, you immediately worked for International Computers Limited, ICL, is that right?
That's correct.
And ICL became Fujitsu Services Limited in 2002.
Around then, I'm not sure exactly when that happened, but yes, it changed its name in the early part of the century.
I was taking that from your witness statement.
Right, yes. I wasn't 100% sure of the date, but that was the best of my recollection.
You remained there for the whole of your professional career, is that right?
That's correct.
Until you retired in 2015.
Correct.
Dealing briefly at the moment with the stages of your career at ICL Fujitsu, so far as concerns us, from about 1996 to about 2000, did you work in the agent team?
That's correct, yes.
You were one of a team of 20 or 10 to 20 architects working on the Horizon system, is that right?
Something like that, yes.
From about 2000 until retirement in 2015, you worked in the architecture and design team, is that right?
That's right, yes.
That was part of the development team, is that right?
It varied. At some points it was, at other points it was a separate team, but the work was similar in those respects.
So it was part of the development team, I think, until it merged with what was called the requirements department, is that right?
Yes.
How many people were in the architecture and design team?
I can't remember the exact numbers, but again, it's varied a lot. It started off with about 20 or 30. I think I've got the figure in my witness statement. And by the time I retired, it was down to something like about half a dozen, that sort of number.
And were they all the same level or pay grade as you, or was there seniority within the department?
Different people were at different grades, but that wasn't necessarily reflected in terms of a management structure as such.
Throughout your time, I think your role was a technical or operational one, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Not a managerial or supervisory role, is that right?
No, I never had any man management responsibilities during that time.
You tell us in your witness statement that from 2002 to 2008, you, quote, took on the role of defining the technical changes required by Project Impact and worked on the implementation of the Bureau de Change and the acceptance of credit cards, is that right?
Among other things, so those were the main developments. So I worked on Impact until that went live in 2005, I think it was. Then I worked on Bureau de Change and credit card changes, and then a few other minor things before I moved on to Horizon Online requirements capture.
Did you move on to Horizon Online from about 2008?
It was around then, yes. I can't remember the exact time.
And did you work on Horizon Online from 2008 to about 2015?
Yes.
You tell us in your witness statement that you, quote, worked with post office analysts in defining the technical requirements for Horizon Online, is that right?
Yes, that's true.
And that you, quote, supported Post Office's requirements team in specifying use cases for the counter functionality.
That's correct, yes.
What does that mean?
The contractual definition of how Horizon Online was to work was that the counter should operate in the same way as it did on Legacy Horizon, and therefore it was decided that we needed to put in place something that actually defined exactly what that was, and the technique that was decided was that Post Office would put together the use cases to define the various activities that went on in a post office, to define the steps that people went through for doing, from how do you sell a stamp to how do you balance at the end of the week or whatever.
That's, sorry to interrupt you, that's a use case.
Each one of those would be a separate use case, yes, sorry.
Did you then develop the implementation of those use cases and then test them?
Not personally. There was a team who were developing the counter, and I was acting as a guide to that team in terms of interpreting what the use cases meant and looking at how the code that they developed came out. And I was responding to when queries came out of the testing process as to should it work this way or should it work that way, is this a problem or is that how it's supposed to work, and reacting to things like that.
You tell us that during your time at Fujitsu, you were a group of anywhere between 20 and 100 software designers and developers who would provide fourth-line support for both Legacy Horizon and Horizon Online.
Yes, the way fourth-line support worked was that the people who were doing the development were expected to spend a small part of their time in actually supporting the live service and the system under test. And so that's what fourth-line support was all about, and I did that just like everyone else in the development team.
That was an adjunct to your main role?
Correct.
And although I'm sure the fraction varied, what proportion of your time was given over to fourth-line support?
It was supposed to average out at about 10%, and I think that's roughly what it ended up as.
Thank you. In your first witness statement, you refer to ICL introducing what's called a distinguished engineer scheme, correct? And you tell us that you became a distinguished engineer in the mid-1990s.
Yes, I can't remember exactly when.
You were one of about 100 other ICL employees who were described as distinguished engineer, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that that was an honorific title conferred upon you by ICL or Fujitsu?
Yes, it was. It didn't make any difference to what I got paid or anything like that. It was purely seen as an honour and just recognition of that I had a fairly senior design role and was respected within the company.
What was the process that led to you becoming a distinguished engineer?
I think I was nominated by my manager, who filled in various complicated forms to justify why I should become one.
Was there any further training or qualification or a particular professional experience that was required before you could become a distinguished engineer?
Not as such, no.
So it was simply a title given to you by
Correct.
your own company?
Yes, correct.
Did you acquire any level of management responsibility as a result of the
No.
appointment?
No, people did try and persuade me that I ought to manage some people, and I resisted it and successfully.
I think you've told us that it didn't affect your pay.
Correct.
You tell us in your first witness statement that from about 2015 until August 2012, so after, 2022, you were on a retainer with Fujitsu as a consultant, is that right?
That's correct.
And what was the nature of your consultancy with them? What were you consulting about?
It was various things. The expectation was that it would amount to something like about half a dozen or a dozen days a year, and for most of the period it was at that level. I don't think, although I was on the retainer until August 2022, I think the last time I actually did any paid consultancy was just before COVID lockdown in 2020, which is why they decided they since they hadn't been using me for a couple of years, that they didn't need to retain me any further. The one exception to that was the time when the group litigation was happening in 2018, 2019, when I was working a lot more than that, probably an average of about 1 to 2 days a week for a period of about 5 or 6 months.
So did your retainer essentially come to an end at the time of the publication of the Horizon Issues judgment, which was December 19?
No, the retainer came to an end in 2022, but I didn't actually do much retained work after.
Okay.
The last few things were actually talking to the lawyers about the consequences of the Horizon Issues judgment.
Other than the provision of information, assistance and evidence in connection with the litigation concerning the Horizon system, what work did you perform in this consultancy?
I was called to go to a few meetings. A lot of it was to do with the hangouts from prosecution. I wasn't involved in any particular prosecutions as such, but there was quite a lot of work going on in the background, which talking to various lawyers. I got pulled in 2016 for a bug that had been found that's quite serious, the Dalmellington bug that I think you may well be coming back to later on, and it was felt that I could maybe help explain what the consequences of that was to Post Office. There was a problem that the Post Office had, again, I can't remember the exact date now, it's in my witness statement, when there was a mismatch in Post Office's back-end accounts. They tried to do a reconciliation against data they had from Fujitsu, and I realised what the problem was. It was to do with the fact that they were taking the accounts at different times. One was taking what the cash positions were at 7 o'clock in the evening, and the other was taking the cash position at midnight, and therefore this accounted for the mismatch that they had in the account. So it was various ad hoc, fairly self-contained tasks, each of which lasted maybe 2 or 3 days.
There seems to be a fly
Yes, there is. It's a bit of a pain.
buzzing around you. I don't want you to be distracted.
No, I'm trying to ignore it.
Yeah. If it becomes too much, we'll break and get rid of it.
Okay.
Would it be fair to say that the majority of this time, certainly between 2015 and the Horizon Issues judgment in December 2019, was given over to the provision of litigation support?
Certainly in 2018 and 2019. I'm not sure it was direct litigation, so it was probably about half and half. As I say, I can't remember the gory details of exactly what I was doing when, but there were a number of notes that I produced which I wasn't quite sure what the background was, but looking back at it now, I realised was actually maybe in preparation for what eventually became the GLO.
Have you read the Horizon Issues judgment?
I skimmed through it at the time, and I've looked at various sections of it. I don't claim to have read it every word, I'm afraid.
In high-level summary, would you agree that Mr. Justice Fraser concluded, firstly, that legacy Horizon was not remotely robust?
I accept that that's what he said.
Yes. Do you accept that Horizon Online was susceptible to accounting flaws? That's what he...
Again, that is what he said. I think he's maybe putting it too strongly. I felt that Horizon Online was and is, because after all this is still the system that's operating today, doing a good job in terms of the accounting, particularly with the monitoring that was going on, in terms of being able to detect things when they had occurred.
He concluded that sub-postmasters were not informed of and were therefore oblivious to a range of bugs, errors and defects. Do you agree that that's a summary of what he found?
That is certainly what he said, yes.
And lastly, that those bugs, errors and defects could result in, i.e. cause, discrepancies or shortfalls in the branch accounts of sub-postmasters, thereby corrupting transactions, disrupting data processing and recording transactions.
That was a possibility, but I'm not sure that even today, I understand what bugs actually did cause the problems that people that people have suffered from.
Do I take it that you accept his first finding that Legacy Horizon was not remotely robust?
I don't accept that finding.
You don't accept his finding that Horizon Online was susceptible to accounting flaws?
There were some discrete bugs that caused problems to the accounts, but they were very discrete, and I believe that they were all well controlled and managed at the time.
And you don't accept his findings that bugs, errors and defects could result in, i.e. cause, discrepancies or shortfalls in branch accounts?
They could cause discrepancies in branch accounts, but not at the sort of levels that are being talked about. And in general, the systems, I believe, were operating as they should.
Robustly?
It depends exactly what you mean by robust, but as long as you're not saying infallibly, then yes, because I think robust meant that there were mechanisms in place that would monitor what was going on, detect problems, and that they were then investigated and resolved correctly.
Horizon, both Legacy and Online, was working well in your view?
Most of the time. There were clearly problems during the pilots in both cases, and there were clearly individual problems that affected individual branches, and I'm sure we'll come on to those at some time. But in general, then I felt that the systems were working well.
The judge got it wrong?
I wouldn't like to say that, but I think there's a difference in emphasis between there were clearly problems, and he identified a number of problems, and I won't dispute those problems happened. But on the whole, I felt that the systems were working well.
Can I turn in more detail to your role in the development and rollout of the Horizon system? And in, no need to turn it up, paragraphs 18 to 23 of your first witness statement, you describe your roles and responsibilities at ICL and then Fujitsu. So between 1996 and 2002, you tell us that your initial role with Legacy Horizon was, quote, to integrate Riposte and the Oracle-based software, yes?
That's correct, yes.
And that you helped develop an agent layer that would allow those two types of software to communicate with each other.
Correct.
Firstly, can you describe briefly what Riposte was?
Riposte was a messaging... Well, let's step back one. There were two aspects to Riposte, and this was software that we had bought in at Post Office's request from a company called Escher in the United States. The bit of it that I was primarily involved in was what was called the message store, which was a way that all the data about what had happened in a branch was being recorded. So it's a sophisticated database in crude terms, and that was where the data, not only of transactions, but working data during the day, what had gone on when people logged on, all sorts of things, was all recorded in this message store. Then the other part of Riposte was a development environment that allowed applications to be built on that, and the application environment that caused the human interface that the postmasters saw in the branches. And that bit of Riposte I had not very little involvement with in the early days. I got more involved in that when I moved on to Project Impact in 2003 or so, but in the early days my main interaction with Riposte was to do with the message store. And
thank you. And then the Oracle-based software. Can you describe again briefly, as you've just done, what the Oracle-based software was?
This was really an Oracle database, and this was used to communicate with Post Office's back-end systems where they did their back-end accounting. So that was really the boundary between what Fujitsu was doing or ICL was doing and what Post Office was doing. So that was basically an overnight batch processing system. So it would process through all the transactions. It would generate files of transactions that had happened during that day, which were then transmitted to Post Office's back-end systems.
And you say that you developed an agent layer. What is an agent layer?
So what the agent layer was doing is it was reading data from the message store, which we had copies of the message store in the data center, and extracting the relevant transactions and other information that was of interest to post offices' back-end systems, and writing records to the Oracle databases to reflect those transactions. Then there was also a flow in the other direction. For example, reference data was being generated by Post Office, and by reference data, the simplest example is what's the price of a stamp today, because obviously the price of stamps changes every now and again. So therefore, things like prices weren't actually built into the code. We just knew that you need to sell a stamp, and then behind that there would be a bit of reference data that says, well, if you sell a stamp, it's going to cost you whatever a stamp costs today, £1.15. Back in the day, it was about 30p or something.
Given that the work started in 1996, what challenges existed in ensuring that the communication by the agent layer was enabled?
I'm not quite sure I understand
Yes.
the question.
You tell us in your witness statement that your role lasted between 1996 and 2002, which is post-rollout.
Yes.
What took 6 years?
Right. The work changed a lot over time, because at the beginning, back in 1996, the first application that was rolled out was actually a benefits agency application, which by 1999 had actually got dropped because the benefits agency pulled out of the contract. So a lot of...
Just stopping there, I wonder whether you mind slowing down a little bit.
Sorry.
Although the shorthand writer hasn't said anything so far, I can imagine
Sorry.
that she wants to.
Yes.
So if you can just slow down a little bit, please. What did you know as to the reasons why the benefits agency pulled out of the contract?
I'm not sure that I was really aware of the detail. That was something that was taking place at levels way above where I was working.
What were you told?
I can't remember now what I was told. I think they decided they were going to do things differently. What they eventually did was they paid people's benefits directly into their bank accounts rather than doing it through a special application in the post office.
Were you told anything to the effect that one of the reasons why the benefits agency withdrew was a lack of confidence in ICL?
I'm not sure that I was aware of that at the time.
And doubts over the integrity of the data that the nascent system was producing?
I don't remember hearing that at the time.
Anyway, you continued in the role until 2002. Does that mean that the agent layer required a continual level of support and maintenance even after rollout?
No, because there's new functionality. So the main thing I was doing in the early 2000s was network banking was introduced into the system in 2003, and a few months later the support of debit cards was introduced. So the main work I was doing with the agents then was supporting the changes that were required, because one of the things the agents did was they interfaced between the data centres and the banking systems. And that was clearly a fairly significant development.
You tell us that you moved away from the agent team and took on the role of defining changes required by Project Impact. Did the work of the agent team continue after you left?
Oh yes, there was a team there. Someone else took over the role of chief designer within the agent team. I think he actually took over that role about 2000, something like that, and I was gradually moving on to other things on the side. So it wasn't a sudden drop this and do that. It was more of an evolution than a revolution.
In your role between 1996 and 2002, were you in any way responsible for communicating with the post office team as to their requirements?
Not so much with their requirements, though. That really started with Project Impact, but I certainly was working with the post office team in terms of defining the interfaces between how Fujitsu's agents were operating and how they interacted. Well, initially there was a box in between us and the banks called the network banking engine, which was provided by IBM. So initially we provided the interface into that. Then later on that was replaced, after I was no longer involved, by a direct interface to the banks.
Did you come into contact with Jeremy Folkes, the infrastructure assurance team leader from the post office?
Not at that time, but I did come across him a few years later when he'd moved roles and he actually joined Escher as one of their consultants. So I did come across Jeremy in his role with Escher, but I don't remember coming across him when he was working with Post Office.
He told the inquiry, it was back on the 2nd of November 2022, that we, and by that he meant the Benefits Agency and the Post Office Counters Limited team, had, quote, been denied viability of the application design.
Not quite sure what he meant by that.
He continued, when I say we had some visibility of risk areas, what I mean is that the areas where we had raised formal risks to the service provider at the start, such as riposte, in those cases we did get more information. But as far as the application design, in particular EPOS, we had been denied visibility.
I think that was something to do with the way the contract had been negotiated between or ICL management, as it was then, and Post Office and DSS. I wasn't involved in any of that, but as I understand it, it was a PFI contract, and part of that meant that the customer had to treat the whole thing as a black box. But to say this is hearsay, if you like, rather than something I was directly involved in.
Where did the hearsay come from?
Just chat around the office to say I wasn't directly involved in all of that, but clearly people were talking about. I think I was aware that Post Office did not have the right to see various design documents that were being produced.
And what do you mean that they were buying a black box?
That it was up to Fujitsu exactly how they designed the application, and the details of how the internal design was done was something for Fujitsu or ICL to worry about, and it wasn't something that Post Office would get involved in.
Would a consequence of that be, in relation, for example, to EPOS, mean that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for the Post Office to ensure that there was data integrity?
I don't think it went that far. There were certainly joint test teams. There was a lot of testing going on. There were Post Office testers involved in testing the system to make sure that it came out with the right outputs. Yeah.
He suggested that the fact that the Post Office had purchased a black box and had no right to see how the black box worked meant that it was difficult, if not impossible, to ensure data integrity within the Horizon system. You disagree with that?
I would disagree with that, yes.
And you say that the answer to that is that they were entitled to participate in testing?
Yeah, as I say, I wasn't really involved at that sort of level at that time. I was just looking after making sure that the agents worked rather than worrying about how the counter worked and things like that.
Were you conscious, and those with whom you worked conscious, that the nature of the contract was a PFI contract, and therefore the client had no rights, no visibility over the way the system was built?
I think I was aware of that, yes.
What effect did it have on your work?
Nothing really. Other than, at that time, I wasn't having any real contact with the customer anyway. I only started getting involved with the customer later, and it was really a case of. And the main work I was doing with the customer in the early 2000s was with agreeing these banking specs, and there I was working very openly with the customer because there were their specs that were defining the interfaces as to how Horizon was going to interface with initially the banking engine and then also with Streamline for the debit card payments. So that was something that wasn't part of the black box.
Why was the black box being mentioned? Why was it being talked about?
Well, I don't think it was being talked about as such. It was really, I probably picked that up from Jeremy Fox's stuff. As I say, I was aware that it was a PFI contract and that it meant that we didn't necessarily need to share detailed design documents with the customer because it was Fujitsu's intellectual property.
Was that the usual way of working or an unusual way of working?
I'd not worked on contracts like that before. Before I'd been in an internal development role, actually producing products that were sold rather than working as a client for a specific customer.
So you wouldn't know one way or the other?
Correct.
In relation to your fourth line support role, you tell us in your witness statements, the first witness statement of paragraph 25, quote, I would only have been aware of bugs, errors and defects specifically allocated to me by third line support, or where I was asked to route the issue to the correct person in fourth line support, or where I was asked for specific input on the problem because of my particular expertise, correct?
Yes.
Within your roles in Legacy Horizon, did you have any oversight of all bugs, errors and defects within the system at any given time?
No.
So you couldn't at any particular time speak to the existence or non-existence of bugs, errors and defects in the system?
Not from my personal knowledge, no.
If you did not have knowledge of or oversight of all bugs, errors and defects within the system at any given time, who did?
I would have thought the SSC would, and there was an area called Customer Services. SSC was part of that. There were also problem managers who would look at specific incidents. Now, incidents could be to do with bugs, errors, defects, or more commonly there would be operational issues where a bit of the network went down or connections to banks went down for a few hours, which clearly was caused fairly catastrophic effects at the time, and so their job was to manage these sort of things. So I would have thought that if there was an overall knowledge of how well the system was behaving, it would be part of their role.
We've heard from a lot of people from the SSC, and they've told us that there were between 20 and 30 people at any one time working in the SSC, sometimes working shifts, some working at home, some working in the office. That they only knew about the bugs that they were allocated on the stack, and that it was correct that there might be informal sharing of information by people who were sitting next to each other or talking about it at the water cooler, but there was no formalised system for sharing knowledge within the SSC. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. They would obviously be able to speak better about that sort of thing than I was. I wasn't part of the SSC.
But when I asked you who may have oversight of all bugs, errors and defects within the Horizon system, you pointed to the SSC.
As part of that, but there was also there was the whole point of the Customer Services Directorate was to actually manage the interface with Post Office, including knowledge of what had been going on in the system, what sort of problems there were and things like that.
That's a day-to-day function. What I'm looking for, I mean, it might be described as an all-seeing eye, but somebody who took a step back and would be able to say, we've had these problems in the past with Horizon, these bugs, errors and defects, and at the moment we're servicing the existence of these possible bugs, errors and defects. Was there any such person?
I can't immediately think of anyone who would have that specific role.
When you were in fourth line support, how would you generally become aware of such bugs, errors and defects as you did become aware?
There was a system called Peak, and it had a predecessor called Pinnacle, and the way that operated, that was effectively a database of the various defects, and that included those found during testing as well as those during live. And what happened was that peaks or pinnacles would be allocated to a particular person, and I think you'd normally get an email saying you've had this peak that's allocated to you. You could then log into the peak system, have a look at the peak, see what it said, and then decide what you need to do with it next.
And again, same questions. Within your various roles within Horizon Online, did you have oversight of all bugs, errors and defects?
Not as such, but I did have probably a better view of them, particularly during the pilot phase of Horizon Online, because during the pilot phase there was a project team in place that was managing the pilot and taking very close monitoring of any issues that were going on during the pilot, and I would often get called in by that team to investigate particular problems, particularly those that affected the counter.
After the pilot phase of Horizon Online was over, did you have oversight of all bugs, errors and defects within the Horizon Online system?
No.
Same questions. If not you, did anyone?
Again, I think it was something that customer services were supposed to be monitoring and managing. Now, whether they had that sort of stand-back oversight role that you described earlier, I can't think of any one person that did actually have that sort of role, but I hadn't really thought of it that way at the time.
And again, same questions. How would you generally become aware of such bugs, errors and defects as you became aware of in Horizon Online?
The peak system was working. It was the same peak system that operated for both Legacy Horizon and Horizon Online.
And so for both Legacy Horizon and Horizon Online, you became aware of things that might be bugs, errors and defects through the Pinnacle and then the peak system?
There was that, but there was also the problem management system. So then when something was identified as being a serious problem, and I think we're probably going to go on talking about the receipts and payments mismatch problem at some stage, then I was often called in to help firstly analyse the problem and explain that problem so that Fujitsu management could understand what it was all about, and I often got involved in explaining it to the equivalent people in post office about what the impact of that was and what could be done to remedy it, both in terms of fixing the code but also fixing whatever the business impact of the problem was, which wouldn't necessarily be fixed directly just because you'd fixed the code.
So for you personally, there were two ways in which you became aware of bugs, errors and defects in Horizon. Yes. Firstly, through your role, the 10% of your time role, on fourth line support, and that would largely be happenstance, would it? I.e. which peaks were allocated to you?
The 10% wasn't just for the peaks, so any time that I spent talking about serious incidents and things like that, that was all part of what I saw as the 10% of the time.
In any event,
yes.
In your role in fourth line support,
yes.
It would be largely happenstance, whether it was you or somebody else, one of the other people performing fourth line support who had a particular bug, error or defect allocated to them.
Yes, it was based really on the skills and what area the problem had happened in.
If it was largely happenstance that you became aware of a bug, error or defect in both Legacy Horizon and Horizon Online, how could you subsequently give full, complete and accurate evidence about the existence or non-existence of bugs, errors and defects in Horizon?
What I was aware of was the fact that bugs that actually impacted the accounts were very rare. There was good monitoring in place to detect them, and they got fixed shortly afterwards. So in terms of what was actually there in the live system at any one time, it was very rare for there to be bugs there that would cause problems, and therefore I was confident in the way that the system was operating, that it was operating correctly.
To give that kind of very confident answer to a court, wouldn't you want to know of the existence of each of the bugs and how they've been resolved and whether in fact there was any ongoing impact?
I didn't realise at the time that I needed to do that. So at the time, no, I didn't think I needed to do that. Obviously, with hindsight, I realised that maybe I should have been doing more research. But at the time, I felt that that was sufficient.
And that in that sentence, meaning a general confidence in the system and the way that it operated?
Yes, and the processes that are in place to actually control things.
So general confidence in the system plus processes that you thought were working allowed you confidently to give a generalised view. Is that right?
I think so, yes.
During your employment within Fujitsu, did any of your roles entail any overall responsibility for monitoring, identifying or fixing bugs, errors or defects?
Well, we've talked about some of those already, so I'm not quite sure what's...
I mean, did they always come to you?
Oh, no. I mean, they go to whoever was the relevant person. So there were certain areas that normally they just went straight to the development teams and I didn't get involved in things. I tended to get involved if it was seen as being a broader issue or something like that. But not necessarily me. There are other people who also in particular areas will get called in.
And how many other people?
I'm not sure, sort of another half dozen or a dozen, something like that.
And what were the circumstances in which you would get called in?
A bit difficult to define, really. Certainly when we got on to things like Horizon Online, if it was seen as having an impact on the accounts, then we realised that that was a very serious problem and that I would be getting involved in those, which is why I got involved with what I see as the main serious issues in Horizon Online. And I was involved in receipts and payments mismatch, the local suspense issue, and Dell Manington. Those are the ones I see as being the serious issues with Horizon Online, and I got involved in all of them because they saw me being helpful in terms of my expertise and background for those particular cases.
That was my next question. Why did they come to you?
Because I'd had experience of dealing with things. I think it was felt that I was in a good position of turning some of the technical jargon into something that lay people could understand better. Now, having read my witness statements, you may disagree with that, but it was felt that I was in a good position to be able to actually explain the technical problems in a way that could be understood, and to do that both in terms of written notes and in meetings with the customer when these problems occurred.
What was the threshold for you becoming involved?
I'm not sure. I would get involved by probably a phone call or an email from someone either in the SSC or from problem management, and they say, Gareth, can you come and give us a hand, look at this problem and see what's going on?
For all the problems that didn't get referred to you, where that trigger was not pressed,
yeah.
How did you become aware of those? Or didn't you?
Probably the answer is I didn't.
When you started to become the man that the post office relied on to give evidence in court, did anyone say, we need to make sure that Mr. Jenkins knows about the things that are not referred to him?
No.
Did it occur to you, I might need, before going to court, to find out about the things that have not been referred to me, that aren't these level of particular seriousness or which have financial or economic consequences?
That didn't occur to me, but again, as I've said before, I was confident, and possibly wrongly so, that that when problems did occur, they were quickly fixed and they weren't left to sort of fester in the system to have a larger impact.
I think you've acknowledged it a couple of times already. Knowing what you know now, would you adopt the same approach of relying on your confidence?
I think I'd have to say that with hindsight, I would have done things differently, yes.
What interactions did you have with the third line of support, the SSC, in relation to identifying and rectifying bugs, errors and defects?
I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean by that question, sorry.
Yes. What was the nature of your communication with third line support?
Usually either by exchange of emails or telephone conversations and things like that. The third line support team were in a locked area, so it was actually quite difficult to actually go, and I did occasionally go and visit them and talk to them at their desks and things like that, but generally that was a difficult thing to do because of getting through the security systems to actually get to where their desks were. So it was normally done by sort of phone or email, or in meetings if they came out of their area to our slightly less secure areas.
Thank you. Can I turn to EPOS and riposte, please?
Yep.
In relation to the EPOS aspects of Horizon, you tell us, it's paragraph 21 of your second witness statement, no need to turn it up. In summary, until around 2003, I do not recall having anything to do with EPOS other than indirectly when it had an impact on my work with the agents. From around 2003 onwards, I began to gain technical expertise and a practical understanding of how EPOS operated. Is that correct?
Yes, I'd agree with that.
You've told us already that Isha was responsible for provision of the riposte software, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And that comprised of two main parts, the message store and the desktop counter. Is that right?
Correct.
And the latter of those, the desktop counter was the basis for the EPOS system.
Correct.
I think you went to Esher in Boston for a week in 1996. Is that right?
Yes, and I think I went back there for 2 or 3 ad hoc trips after that. But that was my initial. That was effectively my first week on the post office account, when I got sent to Boston for a week to learn about how Riposte worked.
If you did not have anything to do with EPOS other than indirectly, why did you go to Boston for a week in 1996?
Because that was talking more about how the Riposte message store was working, and also there were specific interfaces that Riposte had that could be used by the agents. So that was covered in the first week of what I think was a 3-week training course. It then went on to how did the counter applications operate, and I wasn't particularly interested in that at the time, so it was felt that rather than stay in Boston for another couple of weeks, I might as well come home. So I did.
So is the answer that you went to Boston to learn how the EPOS system worked, in particular how it might interact with the work that you were undertaking?
No, I went to Boston to learn how Riposte worked, and therefore how the agents could actually use it. There may have been slight mention of how applications could work in that first week, but I think the detail of that was really covered afterwards, and I just didn't get involved in any of that.
In relation to the development of EPOS before the rollout of Legacy Horizon, we've heard evidence from David McDonnell. Did you know him?
Vaguely. I have a vague recollection of him.
He told the inquiry, quote, "My understanding was that Gareth, that's you, Gareth Jenkins, worked alongside another chief architect under Alan Ward." Was that correct?
I certainly did have a dotted line relationship to Alan Ward, who was the chief architect at that time. I thought that David McDonnell actually suggested I was the chief architect, and he's certainly mistaken in that belief.
He continued, Gareth Jenkins' responsibility was specifically to the EPOS counter system. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
He said, as the chief architect, I would have expected him to be much more involved in overseeing a lot of the previous coding standards and methodologies and things like that, and certainly the design documents. You've, I think, answered this question already. Were you the chief architect of Horizon?
No, I wasn't.
Who was the chief architect of Horizon?
Alan Ward was at that time. And I know he was quite involved in the development of EPOS at that time, because there were quite a lot of changes being made, and he used to regularly fly off to Boston for a couple of days almost every week to actually work with Escher on changes to EPOS. Now, exactly what those changes were, I've no idea. I was just aware that it wasn't a good idea to try and find him on a Monday and Tuesday, because he was probably in Boston.
Again, if you can just slow down
Sorry.
Your evidence slightly, please. He told us that there had been a lack of formalised sign-off designs, a lack of discipline, a lack of professional qualifications in key positions, and a total disengagement of the chief architect, Gareth Jenkins, that there were poor coding standards, no methodology in place, and no unit testing. The issues were critical, making the EPOS product unstable. They were known to everyone in the building. Taking those in turn, you've already told us that you were not the chief architect of Horizon, but putting that aside, in relation to EPOS, did you know whether or not there was an existence or a lack of formalised sign-off designs?
I've no idea what they had. I know what we had in the agent team, and things were formally signed off there. I've no idea what sort of processes they were following in the EPOS team.
Did you know whether or not there was a lack of discipline and a lack of professional qualifications in the EPOS team?
I wasn't close enough to it to know either way.
Did you know one way or the other whether they were using poor coding and there was an absence of methodology in place?
I have no idea.
Did you know whether or not there was unit testing within the EPOS team?
I don't know.
He says that those issues were critical and were known to everyone in the building. you're telling us that...
I would agree they were critical as to being known to everyone in the building. The other thing to remember is that the EPOS team was based in Feltham and I was based in Bracknell. Yes, I used to visit Feltham a couple of times a week, but I wasn't actually based in the building all the time, so therefore I would have had less knowledge of what was going on in the background.
And so these rather important facts that he told us about, you were entirely unaware of?
Correct. And I would agree with him that they are important facts.
Were you aware of an EPOS task force being set up by ICL?
I don't think I was aware of it at the time. Obviously, I'm aware of it now from the documents I've been shown, but I don't think I was aware of it at the time.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 308 0690? If we just look at page 2, please. We can see this was originally dated the 18th of September 1998.
Yes.
And this finalised version is dated the 14th of May 2001. You go back to page 1.
Yep.
Please. Back to page 1. It's a report of the EPOS Pinnacle Task Force, and it reports on the activities of the EPOS Pinnacle Task Force, which was in place between the 19th of August and the 18th of September 1998 to reduce to manageable levels the EPOS Pinnacles outstanding at that time. You can see, although it's on the second page described, I think, as a finalised version, the status is still a draft.
Yeah.
The distribution does not include you. It's to Messrs Austin Bennett and McDonnell, but then library. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
What was the nature of ICL's document library at this time?
There was a document management system, I think. I can't remember exactly when that became formalised. I think Matthew Lenter may have described something about this when he appeared a couple of weeks ago. And there was a document management system to which all documents were put, and people could look at documents if they wished to do so. But normally, you would only be looking at documents that either you'd written yourself or were being asked to review in that library.
So you wouldn't...
I wouldn't have seen this document
unless
someone had pointed out, say, what do you think of this document? And I'm not aware that they ever did.
So it wasn't used as a knowledge base for those at your level to peruse or look at your leisure?
I suppose I could have done if I'd got nothing better to do, but I don't think I would have been particularly interested in what was happening with EPOS at that time.
I think you've seen this document.
I've seen this document recently, yes.
And you know, I'm not going to take you through it, we've seen it many times, it gives a very damning account of the problems with EPOS.
I agree.
Mr. McDonnell told us in his evidence that he presented this report to you. Is that true?
I don't think he presented it to me. I think he presented it to whoever commissioned it, which I think I understand now is Terry Austin.
And that you, quote, denied the issues point blank and ran off to hide in Bracknell and avoided contact with the team.
I don't think that's correct. I was, as I said before, I was based in Bracknell, not in Feltham. I don't think I was hiding there particularly. I don't think I had any involvement with the EPOS Pinnacle Task Force.
He said that we managed to get Gareth down to the counter team twice. Do you remember that?
I don't. I do remember having some involvement with him with some issues with logistics visa system, which is something I think he moved on to work with after he left, was no longer with the counter team. But I don't recall having anything to do with him in terms of EPOS. He
said that his team tried to engage you in a conversation about the missing API. Do you remember what that is?
I think that was to do with this LFS thing that I mentioned previously. So I think that was in a role that he took on after the EPOS team. I can't remember the gory details of it, I'm afraid. But
he said that you were very defensive of it and said there's nothing wrong with it as it is.
I think it was more a case of pragmatism in that I think he wanted to totally change the way that the Escher software interfaced with the applications. And I could understand why he felt that there may have been a better way of doing it. But I could also see that there was no way that Escher was going to go and totally rewrite their software when it was basically operating and doing what it needed to do. The fact that there was a better way did not necessarily mean that it would be justifiable to actually change it. So I think there may have been some sort of conversation along those lines. But as I say, it's a very long time ago and I can't really remember the details, but that's a vague memory I have of that area.
He said that he tried to engage you to lend your, quote, political design weight behind at least the cash account being rewritten. Is that correct?
I don't have any recollection of being involved with anything to do with the cash account at that time.
He said that he was unable to engage you to get you on his side and to lend your persuasive weight to persuade Terry Austin to rewrite the cash account. Is that correct?
I have no recollection of that, and I can't see how I would possibly have been able to persuade Terry that something to do with the cash account when there was nothing to do with my area.
Did you have what he describes as political design weight? A certain amount of power?
Probably not so much at that time. I think maybe later on then that could be said. But at that time, my main role was to do with the way the agents worked, which was a fairly small cog in the system. It was a fairly central cog. And yes, I think people did tend to listen to me when I had technical ideas. But I think that's overstretching things, what you've just read out.
He said that you became evasive with him and he was never able to persuade you to come back down to Feltham.
I just can't remember those sort of interactions. I've described, to the best of my recollection, the only sort of interaction that I might have had with him, and that's a very, very vague memory. I'm sorry.
Leaving aside your involvement and role, in the way that Mr. McDonnell has described. Would you agree with, looking back now, about what he said about the EPOS team in the late 1990s? He said the team was like the Wild West. There were no standards in place. There were no design documents. The culture of the development team was, I wouldn't say it was a holiday camp, it was a free format. There was no structure, no discipline. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
I wasn't close enough to actually form any opinion on that, I'm afraid.
Do you remember going down to his team on at least a couple of occasions?
Not really. As I say, the only recollection I have is discussing issues to do with LFS, which was a later role that he moved on to. I don't remember having any real involvement with the EPOS team at that sort of time.
That can come down, thank you. If you'd been asked the question at rollout time, to what extent does the EPOS system function well and effectively, what would your answer have been?
I don't know.
You don't,
I mean, my answer would have been, I don't know.
You wouldn't know one way or the other?
Yeah.
And so if you were to give evidence about that, you wouldn't be able to say one way or the other?
Correct.
If you were to give evidence later on about events that were happening in 2000, you wouldn't be able to say whether EPOS was functioning well or not?
Not in 2000, no. I believe that it had stabilised by the time I did get involved with it later on, but back in what state it was in 2000, I don't know how stable it was, and clearly, as part of the work I did in 2018, I did find some fairly serious issues that had occurred at that time.
But what were the issues you found out in the course of the group litigation?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
In 2018?
And those were ones that I'd not been aware of until I came across them as part of the group litigation.
Can you, rather than me doing it it'll be late on Thursday, summarise what those are now?
Well, the main one I can think of is the data tree build issue that came around. That's the one that sort of sticks in my mind at the moment. you may find others that you wish to prompt me about, but that's the one that sticks in my mind.
Was that a surprise when you found this out in the course of the group litigation?
That such serious problems had occurred and seemed to, though again with that the problems did get fixed, but I was surprised in some of the cases how long it took to fix them, and there were certainly some fairly inappropriate comments in some of the peaks in terms of whether things should be fixed quickly or not, which I certainly wouldn't have agreed with if I'd seen them at the time, but then it wasn't my job to see them at the time.
And was your surprise compounded by the fact that you had, in the interim period between the relevant events happening with the data tree build failures and you discovering them in 2018, you'd given evidence in written witness statements and on one occasion orally in court?
No, I didn't think it was a problem as far as that was concerned, because at the times that I was giving evidence for, I believed that the EPOS system was stable and was operating correctly. So the fact that there are problems during the pilot and the rollout don't necessarily mean that the problems carry on into the system. I was confident in the way that problems were being picked up and fixed, and new things were being put into the system to actually manage the issues that had been found early on.
We're going to come back to the kind of answer that you've just given quite a lot over the course of the next 2 or 3 days. But in the answer that you've given just now, do you agree that you're focusing on whether it can be shown that an issue had an impact in the case that you are looking at?
Yes.
Rather than giving evidence about the existence of bugs, errors and defects within Horizon, how quickly they manifested themselves to Fujitsu, how promptly the post office was told about them, and the extent to which sub-postmasters had themselves been informed?
Yes, I was primarily looking at what was happening in a particular branch at a particular time.
And was that your mindset when you were giving evidence?
Yes, that's how I approached support, and I didn't see the giving of evidence as being any different from what I was doing in my day-to-day support job. What I'd be asked to do in the support is saying, this has happened, should it have happened, and if not, what's gone wrong? And I just approach things on the same sort of basis.
Thank you. Can we turn to the impact programme? You tell us in paragraph 20 of your witness statement that you became involved in Project Impact, as it was called. That was the name given to it by the post office, and it was essentially, excuse me, the replacement of the back-end accounting system. Is that
yes
an overall description of it?
Yep.
Given your role in the project, can you describe shortly what Project Impact was designed to do so far as the back-end accounting system was concerned?
Post Office had a proprietary in-house system called, if I remember rightly, CBDB, I can't remember what that stands for, where they used to process their accounts. And they decided they wanted to go for a more industry standard system, and SAP was the industry standard, and probably still is, for handling accounts. And so they wanted to move on to that. Now, CBDB worked on the basis that it would take the information from the cash accounts that were signed off each week and derive everything from that, which meant that it was always about a week behind what was really going on. Whilst with an SAP system, they thought they could get a much more real-time knowledge of what was going on in the system. So with SAP, they would know what had happened yesterday and therefore be in a much better position, particularly to control their cash flow, because they saw the amount of cash flowing through the post offices as being a fairly critical measure, because obviously cash had to be paid for, and it was all to do with treasury interest rates and things like that I didn't really understand, but I understood that having a good handle on exactly how much cash you had where made a big difference in terms of post office finances.
Can we look at your first witness statement, please? WITN 0046 0100 at page 13, please. It'll come up on the screen. paragraphs 45 and 46, you say, I believe that ICL Fujitsu was only involved in one aspect of Project Impact, which was implementing changes to Legacy Horizon that would enable it to interface with the new back-end system. This was implemented in two phases as part of the S60 release in 2004 and the S80 release in 2005. My involvement was to design the changes which the Post Office wanted. I remember that these phases of the work required a major re-engineering of the accounting processes in each Post Office branch. For example, removing the cash account and introducing the branch trading statement.
That's correct, yes.
And so, as the counters specialist, which is what you were, you redesigned part of the legacy Horizon system that produced the accounts for the sub-postmaster to sign off. Would that be fair?
I oversaw that. I think the main detail was done by other designers, but my main role was actually identifying exactly what the output needed to be of the system. Okay. So, yeah.
So you were the lead designer,
yes,
for this part of the Impact programme?
Correct.
I.e., that part of the programme which redesigned the accounts for sub-postmasters to sign off?
Yes.
Can we look, please, at poll 303 8878? If you look at the foot of the page, you'll see it's dated the 3rd of March 2004.
Right, yeah.
If we go to the top of the first page, it's described as branch trading reporting, management and control, and transaction management, conceptual design. Is essentially this a design document for the Impact programme?
Not really. I'd call it a requirements document. So Post Office decided that the term conceptual design was what should be the document be called, but to me it was a requirements document. This was setting out what Post Office wanted to happen, and this was actually written by Post Office, though aided by a Fujitsu requirements analyst called Phil Boardman, who I believe has been in front of the inquiry a year or so ago. But this
and you contributed to this?
I was involved in the workshops doing it. I don't think I wrote any of the text in there, but I was involved in commenting on it and helping put together the diagrams. But it's basically understanding what Fujitsu wanted to do, and my involvement was really a case of saying, well, if you want to do that, is that practical? Would it be better to do it in a slightly different way to make it more practical from an implementation?
So if we scroll down a little bit,
view.
We see your name as a contributor.
Yes.
Are you saying you didn't contribute to this?
Well, I contributed ideas to it, but I don't think I actually wrote any of the words in it.
Can we go to page 22, please? And paragraph 6.7, an overview. If we just read this together, this area of functions has the purpose of providing mechanisms to make adjustments to branch accounts to correct errors and ensure branch accounts align with the Post Office accounts within POL FS. Various mechanisms are available to identify errors that require adjustments, and the discrepancy management functions may be initiated from various places across the business. The main areas will be from within the branch, from Post Office clients, or centrally via distributing electronic transaction corrections. These corrections will replace the current error notice processes and should not involve any manual paperwork or processing. They'll be received and actioned via Horizon and will be distributed more quickly, potentially only days after an error is recorded. The analysis has also identified requirements to more tightly control and police the use of the suspense account within the branch accounts. Only a limited subset of the existing suspense account products will be retained. The contractual requirements for agents to make good unknown errors in branch accounts will be used instead. What did you understand that second part of 6.7 to mean?
I understood that they wanted to limit the use of the suspense accounts. My understanding was that that there were a number of suspense accounts, and postmasters could actually post money to the suspense account for some sort of business reason, which I never really did understand. And they wanted to reduce the amount of money that was being posted into suspense accounts. Now, exactly why they wanted to do that, that was part of Post Office's business for trying to save money. And now in what way it did that, I didn't really understand.
Were you told why they wanted to, quote, more tightly control and police the use of the suspense account?
Not in so many words. What I believe was behind a lot of this was they were trying to reduce the number of staff that they had in Chesterfield back office, which were monitoring things like this. So they were trying to actually automate things and reduce the flexibility on the postmasters, which I thought was a business decision for Post Office and nothing for me to get involved in.
Were you told that the suspense account was considered by the Post Office to be a vehicle for sub-postmasters to hide fraud?
I can't remember. There were various discussions about behaviours of postmasters and things like that, but and I know the Post Office were quite keen to get rid of the suspense account. In fact, they didn't to get rid of it altogether, but I know they were keen to reduce its usage, and there was indeed some reduction on its usage.
Given that reduction on usage, if there was a discrepancy in a sub-postmaster's account after Project Impact, the sub-postmaster would have to accept it and pay it before they could roll over into the new trading period, correct?
That is what I understood the Post Office wanted the system to do, so yes.
And if they didn't pay, the Post Office would, in the language of this document, enforce contractual requirements. Did you understand that?
I didn't really consider that sentence particularly, and I'm not sure that I really understood what that actually meant. My focus was on what exactly was it I had to actually implement in the way that Horizon worked, and what I took from that was I had to simplify the menus for the suspense accounts, which was actually just a reference data change.
Given some of the suspense account products were to be removed, and the consequence of that would be for sub-postmasters to have to accept discrepancies and pay them before they could roll over into new trading periods. Was there any consideration, to your knowledge, of the importance of the accuracy of the figures produced by Horizon?
Well, I always felt it was important that the figures produced by Horizon were accurate, and I wasn't aware that there was any doubt or challenge to that at that stage, so therefore I didn't see that as being an issue as part of what we were doing here.
So is the answer no, that that issue didn't even arise, that the change that we're making, the removal of this facility, means that it is very important that the accounts that are to be signed off by sub-postmasters are 100% accurate?
Yes, and I always felt that they should be 100% accurate.
Of course they should be, but
Yeah.
were you satisfied that they were 100% accurate the whole time?
I don't know that I'd actually thought it through in those sort of terms at the time.
We've heard evidence from Susan Harding, that document can come down, thank you, who told us that the business drivers for the impact programme were to reduce the costs to the business, increasing accounting efficiency and reducing the losses to the Post Office. Do you agree with those, that they were the business drivers that you were told about?
I can't remember the detail of the drivers, but certainly I know that Post Office were trying to reduce their costs. I'd not tweaked so much about the reducing losses, but they were certainly trying to reduce their costs in the back end.
Were you told that a business driver was to improve the Post Office's debt recovery from sub-postmasters?
I don't specifically remember that one, but I can't say that I hadn't seen it in a document.
You tell us in your first witness statement, no need to turn it up, it's paragraph 41, that the effect of the project was to reduce staff costs.
Yes.
Is that what you were told as the driver, or as being the driver?
That's my memory.
Namely, this is all about reducing the number of people at Chesterfield or elsewhere that need to be looking at suspense accounts, rather than the reduction of losses and the improvement of debt recovery.
That's my memory, but I can't be definitive because it's an awfully long time ago now.
You tell us in your witness statement, it's paragraph 43 of your first witness statement, that the decision to remove the ability of sub-postmasters to post discrepancies to a suspense account was because the Post Office, quote, took what I assume to be a business decision to remove this functionality. Was the only thing you were told about the business decision was that it was to reduce staff costs?
I don't know that I would have taken too much notice as to why they were doing things. My main focus on was what was it they wanted changed in the system, not why they were doing it.
Ms. Harding told us that it was agreed during the design of the impact programme that the suspense account would be removed because historically it was used by sub-postmasters to hide discrepancies in their accounts. Were you told that?
I can't remember explicitly exactly what I was told or what I wasn't told.
What understanding did you have as to how the local suspense account had worked historically?
We need to be careful here about terminology because one of the things we introduced here was something called the local suspense account.
I'm talking about at or before 2005. What was your understanding as to how the local suspense account worked?
That's where I'm getting confused. We introduced a new concept as part of Impact called the local suspense account.
Yes.
So as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't a local suspense account prior to Impact, but I think I know what you're referring to.
Yes. What's the answer?
I didn't know how it was used or what it was used for. I just assumed this was part of the business processes that happened. I think I understood that in order to post something to the local suspense account, you did need to have permission. How that actually operated, presumably through MBSE, but exactly how that operated, I didn't know and didn't really concern me particularly.
Do you remember being told by the Post Office that sub-postmasters, quote, hid their discrepancies in the suspense account?
I can't remember, sorry.
Do you remember any evidence of sub-postmasters hiding their discrepancies in suspense accounts?
I don't think I would have seen any evidence of anything like that one way or the other.
Were you given any information as to why sub-postmasters might hide their discrepancies in suspense accounts?
Not that I can remember. Say I wasn't that interested in the whys. I was interested in what it was that I was being asked to do in the system, not why it was being done.
You weren't. You had no professional curiosity in that.
I mean, I went to a number of workshops about these things, and I sat through a number of workshops, but exactly what was discussed in them, because this is over 20 years ago now, I just can't remember the details. So I may have been aware of some of those things at the time. I just have no memory of it now, I'm afraid.
Thank you. So that's an appropriate moment for the morning break. Can we break until 20 past 10, when we'll turn to Mr. Castleton's case?
20 past 11, I think.
11, yes, quite right, sir.
All right, yep, 20 past 11.
Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jenkins. Thank you. Mr. Jenkins, can we turn to Lee Castleton's case, please?
Yep.
Can we start, please, by looking at FUJ 0015 2573? And by going to page 13, please. Thank you. You can see here a letter dated the 18th of November from Bond Pierce, who are the Post Office's solicitors in the case against Mr. Castleton, addressed to Fujitsu. Can you see that?
I can.
And if we just read the first page in summary, it says to Fujitsu, in relation to Mr. Castleton's branch at Marine Drive, we act on behalf of the Post Office. Between those dates, Mr. Castleton was a sub-postmaster at the Marine Drive Post Office. He was strictly responsible for the safe custody of cash and stock, was obliged to make good all losses caused through his own negligence, carelessness or error, and losses of any kind caused by his assistants. Between some dates, net losses of £27,000 occurred at the branch. He was suspended and then dismissed. Post Office has now issued a claim against him to try to recover these net losses. He's issued a counterclaim for wrongful termination of his contract. And then 2, Mr. Castleton's defence. His case is that any shortfall is entirely the fault of the problems with the Horizon computer and accounting system at Marine Drive, and that the Post Office wrongfully terminated his contract, in respect of which he suffered losses not exceeding £250,000. 3 documents are attached. In fact, the second one has some attachments itself. Bentley Johnson, they were the authors of the, Jenkinson, the authors of the report in the second attachment, state that deficiencies have probably been brought forward despite the fact that they've been entered onto the suspense account entry. They suspect this is because the Horizon system, despite the suspense account entry, has failed to recognise the entry on the daily snapshots. They've drawn this conclusion through looking at the discrepancy of £3,500 on the 26th of February 2004. They suggest this double accounting could have continued over a number of weeks, and as such, his defence appears to hold potential merit based on the limited documentation they've so far reviewed. Mr. Castleton believes if he can obtain further documents, such as the daily snapshots, he'll be able to undertake a manual reconciliation of the cash account in order to substantiate his belief that the losses are not real but attributable to computer error. We attach an email from Fujitsu to Richard Benton at the Post Office dated the 5th of May, in which Fujitsu state, quote, "It is possible that they are not accurately recording all transactions on the system and that there was no evidence whatsoever of any system problem." Over the page. Please could you review Mr. Castleton's experts' reports and prepare a formal report dealing with the following points. We need to explain to a judge who will know nothing about Horizon exactly how it works, etc. 2, precisely what steps Fujitsu took to examine the Horizon system at the Marine Drive branch. 3, whether there have been any similar or serious problems with the Horizon system at Marine Drive since his suspension and dismissal. Whether you believe the suggestion put forward by Mr. Castleton's experts is likely to be correct. 5, if there have been any human errors in recording the transactions, could an explanation be that A, there was nothing wrong with Horizon because it simply reflected the information entered onto it, but B, if staff entered the wrong numbers into Horizon, there may have been no real loss, even though Horizon would show a loss, because there could be human error in accounting, accurately recording transactions. If so, excuse me, would that be a likely explanation? 6, any other information you believe may be relevant? And then scroll down, please. Para 4, duty to the court. As a result of the instruction, you may be asked to give evidence before the court. Whilst the Post Office will be liable to pay your fees, in preparing your report and giving evidence, your overriding duty will be to help the court on the matters within your expertise. You agree to meet the requirements of the Civil Procedure Rules Part 35, and a copy is enclosed, and that your report will be 1, addressed to the court and not to the Post Office, 2, confirm that you understand your duty to the court and you've complied and will continue to comply with that duty, 3, contain a statement setting out the substance of all material facts and instructions, whether written or oral, on the basis of which your report is written. The statement should summarise the facts and instructions given to you which are material to the opinions expressed in the report or upon which those opinions are based, and if any of the facts are within your own knowledge, which they are, contain a chronology of relevant events, a statement of truth in the following form, and it's set out. 6, you should note that proceedings for contempt of court may be brought against you if you make a false statement and report verified by a statement of truth without an honest belief it was true. 7, it must contain a declaration that the report has been prepared in accordance with the Code of Guidance on Expert Evidence, which was also enclosed. 8, give qualifications over the page. 9, details of any literature or other material relied upon to make the report. 10, who carried out any test or experiment, etc. 11, give qualifications of the person who carried out any such test, etc. 12, where there's a range of opinion on the matters dealt with, that range should be summarised. 13, give reasons for your own opinion. 14, contain a summary of the conclusions reached, including any qualifications. Given the fundamental importance of meeting these requirements, you should endeavour in your report to not only be accurate but complete. You should mention all matters which you regard as being material to the opinions you express and draw the court's attention to any matter to which you are aware which might adversely affect the validity of those opinions. This applies in relation to factual matters to which you refer and also to the opinions which you express. You should not include in your report anything that's suggested to you by anyone without forming your own independent view. If on reading the report of any other expert or for any other reason you consider that any existing report requires correction or qualification, you'll immediately notify us in writing. And then 5, in performing all your duties for which the client will pay, you will owe a duty to the client to act with the professional standards of skill, care and diligence adhered to by experienced and competent consultants acting as expert witnesses. You'll take reasonable care of any documents, etc. You confirm that you are, one, an independent party and not the client's employee or agent, other than at the material time Fujitsu responsible for looking after the Horizon system. 2, know of no reason why you shouldn't act as a witness for the Post Office in relation to the dispute. 3, will advise us in writing immediately if there's any conflict between your interest and the Post Office interest. We're going to see in a moment that you commented on some passages from this letter. Was this letter sent to you?
I have no recollection of that. I recognise the last bits now as being what an expert's duties are, but the first time I was made aware of what those were when I was first put in touch with solicitors in 2020, 2021 as part of the police investigation into my conduct.
If the letter had, you say you've got no recollection whether or not it was sent to you.
I mean, I think I would have remembered if it had been sent to me, because I can see there that it's clearly set out what the duties are, and I wasn't aware of any of those duties until my solicitor pointed them out to me when we first got engaged at the end of 2020.
When you're giving your answers, Mr. Jenkins, you should refrain, unless you're doing it deliberately, from disclosing communications between your current solicitor and you, which involve either the seeking of legal advice by you or the provision of legal advice to you.
Okay, sorry.
Because if you do that, you might be said to have waived your privilege, your legal professional privilege in those, and I or somebody else can ask you about those.
Okay, I'm
So,
sorry.
I'm trying to help here.
Yes, I understand.
If you wanted to give an answer of the kind that you've just given, it would be without waiving privilege by saying, I only learned that in 2020 or 2021.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, yeah.
It is, of course, open to you to waive privilege,
Yeah.
but I don't want you to do so
No.
accidentally.
No, I don't want to do so either.
Okay. Your reasoning that you didn't see this letter because if you had have seen the letter, you would have learned earlier than you say is the case about the existence of an expert witness's duties.
Correct.
If you had received this letter, presumably you would have read all of it.
I would certainly have skimmed through all of it, yes.
You wouldn't have read half the letter. The first page, but not the second page.
I don't think so. I don't recognise any of it.
you agree that Bond Pierce have set out here, just reading it, the duties of an expert witness, what they entail very clearly, haven't they?
I agree, yes.
In a very easy to understand way, haven't they?
Yes.
Can we turn, please, to FUJ 0015 4713? And if we look at the email at the foot of that page first. Thank you. It's an email dated the 8th of December 2005 about Marine Drive from you to Brian Pinder.
Yep.
What was Brian Pinder's function at this time?
He was the manager of the security team, I believe.
And just tell us what the Fujitsu security team did.
They were responsible for overall security, so making sure that the systems were secure, but they were also involved with communicating with Post Office in terms of providing what was called prosecution support or litigation support. So they were providing things like ARQ data and support of things like this.
Can we just see how this email works? Because it's slightly difficult to understand which bit is you speaking, which bit is Mr. Pinder speaking, and which bit is the questions from the Bond Pierce letter of the 18th of November 2005, okay?
Yes, and I suspect the original would have been slightly easier to decode because
it would be
it's probably multicoloured, yes.
Yeah. We don't have the native.
Yes, I understand that.
Brian, I think that's you writing, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yes. And then the words in dark black or darker black. I've been asked by the fraud investigation team to answer several questions to assist an inquiry regarding a post office employee, sub-postmaster, alleging that the Horizon system may have lost his money. I can manage 5 of the 6 questions, but wonder if you could explain or provide an answer or opinion to the following question. The answers are being directed back to Graham. Would you understand that to be Graham Ward?
I do now. I'm not sure I would have done at the time.
To formalise our response. Is that part in black there something that Mr. Pinder wrote?
I think so. Looking at that page, I think the bits that I would have written is the Brian at the top, and this is certainly true,
yeah.
Which is a bit further down. But I can't be absolutely certain, but that's my guess.
Trying to decode it then, that second paragraph then, after the word Brian, looks like it's Mr. Pinder having sent that to you, and then you've cut it into your email back.
Correct.
And then there's a part in lighter text, almost grey. If there have been human errors in recording the transactions, could an explanation be that A, there was nothing wrong with Horizon because it simply reflected the information entered onto it, semicolon, but, just stopping there. Is that likely to be what Mr. Pinder has included in his original email to you?
Yes, I believe so, and I recognise that as being in the previous document.
One of the six questions in the Bond Pierce letter of the 18th of November. And then you reply, is this right? This is certainly true, i.e. Horizon simply reflects the information entered into it.
Correct, that would have been my comment.
So in relation to if there have been human errors in recording the transactions, could an explanation be there's nothing wrong with Horizon because it simply reflected information entered into it? And you say, this is certainly true, i.e. Horizon simply reflects the information entered into it.
Yeah, that is what I would have said at the time, and I stand by that today as well.
That is a possible explanation?
Yes.
And were you able to say that without investigation of the facts in this case?
Yes, because Horizon is going to record what is actually entered into it, whether that reflects what happened in the real world, and if you do a typo when you put information into Horizon, then it's going to accurately record that typo.
And then part B of the original question, if staff entered the wrong numbers into Horizon, there may have been no real loss, even though Horizon would show a loss, because there could be a human error in accurately recording transactions. And then scroll down. You say, I think, is this right? Again, this could be true. However, if there is some sort of misentering of data into Horizon, then there would be another corresponding error which should be picked up, e.g. as a stock error or some AP client being credited with an incorrect amount. Also, such error should show up as part of the balancing process. And again, you're there saying this could be an explanation. Is that right?
I am.
And then question 3 was, if so, would that be a likely explanation? And you give quite a long reply. And you say it's a possible explanation, but without doing a detailed analysis of everything that's gone on in the branch, it's difficult to speculate as to what happened. Certainly the most likely explanation, it's a misoperation or fraud. However, I appreciate that that is not sufficient for a prosecution. Without understanding exactly what is alleged by Post Office and the sub-postmaster, I don't feel I can add anything further. So, are you saying there, firstly, that you need to see some underlying data in order to say what is likely to have happened?
Yes.
Because otherwise it's mere speculation.
Correct.
I.e. the answers you've given to part A and B are speculation.
Yes.
You say that it's certain that the most likely explanation is misoperation or fraud. Why was it certainly the case that the most likely explanation was misoperation, i.e. by the sub-postmaster, I think, or fraud?
I'm not sure why I would have said that at the time. I mean, looking back now, then I think that's just one of many different options, but I accept that those are the words that I used at the time. But I think I would stand by the fact that I would need to look into exactly what had happened.
Lots of people have said to me, I accept they're the words that I used at the time, and obviously they are. That doesn't change anything.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're on the screen.
Yeah.
Why did you use them?
I don't know, it's a simple answer.
Did they disclose the way you were thinking in December 2005? I.e. the most likely cause of what's being described here
I think
is mistake by the sub-postmaster or fraud by the sub-postmaster.
my feeling was that that was more likely than an error in Horizon, yes. But I'm including the option of it being a mistake.
But you can't say that without looking at the data, can you?
Which is why I go on to say that I needed to look at the data.
You say you appreciate that that is not sufficient for a prosecution. Had you understood this to be a criminal case?
Well, the fact that the request was coming from the security team suggested that it probably was.
Did you at this stage understand the difference between criminal and civil proceedings?
No.
Did you know that there were different types of courts, some which tend to deal with money and some which tend to deal with crime, sending people to prison and the like?
Not really, no.
Did you understand that a prosecution tends to refer to criminal cases?
I'm not sure I really thought about it. As I say, I've not really appreciated any real difference, and so I was probably using fairly loose language. After all, this is an internal email.
There's then a part of the text which says, I've spoken with Dave Baldwin, etc.
Yeah.
Is that paragraph, again, Mr. Pinder?
That I would expect it to be, yes.
I've spoken to Dave Baldwin on this. He recommended I speak with you. I'll also be liaising with him on my final response as we're fundamentally of the opinion that Horizon does not eat money, merely accounts for its placement. And then you finish, I think this is you at the end, saying happy to discuss further if you want to look at some more specific areas of Horizon.
That sounds like me, yes.
The answer to the third question is an important one, isn't it? Because it says the answer to the first two are mere speculation without looking at the data.
Yes.
Can we go to the top of the page, please? Later that day, Mr. Pinder writes back to you and says, for your information, Gareth, this is the response I intend to send to Graham. Read your question, if that's okay. And then comments from Gareth Jenkins. Question 1, if there have been human errors, then A. And you can see your text is faithfully reproduced, yes?
Except that the last point has not been faithfully reproduced.
No, just look at A to start with.
Yes.
That's been faithfully reproduced, hasn't it?
Yes.
And then look at B. That's been faithfully reproduced,
Yes.
hasn't it? Yes? Your answer? Yes?
Yes.
And then C, or I'm going to call it C, the third part of the question. If so, would that be a likely explanation? He has written, not able to comment on this.
Yes.
The detailed and important answer that you gave to the third part of the question has been changed to no comment, hasn't it?
Yes.
Do you know why that was?
No.
It's an important qualifier to the answers to the first two questions, isn't it?
I realise that now. I probably didn't appreciate that at the time.
Why not?
I don't know is the simple answer.
Can you think of a good reason why the careful explanation you've given to question 3 has been changed into no comment?
No, it may have been considered that it was just too complicated an answer. But
What's complicated about an answer? You need to look at the data
Yeah.
to give an accurate picture.
yeah, I don't know. I think you'd have to ask Brian Pinder.
I'm asking you at the moment because what
Yeah,
this is an email to you essentially saying, is it okay
Yeah.
if I send this as your response?
I probably hadn't picked up the fact that it had taken away the qualification that I'd put in the original email, and yeah.
Do you read documents carefully?
I try to, yes.
You're saying you wouldn't have, or you obviously didn't pick this up at the time.
I clearly didn't pick that up on the time. Why he was changing that to a no comment, I wasn't particularly clear. Perhaps I should have taken it up to him as to why he was doing that, but I assumed that he knew what he wanted to respond, and is unable. Maybe he felt that I wasn't in a position to make the comment on that last part. I just don't remember.
But you had, hadn't you?
I had commented on it, yes, but why he decided he didn't want to pass that on, I don't know.
I'm not so much asking for his take. I'm asking
Yeah.
why you assented to this approach. By not saying, well, hold on, you've missed out an important qualifier.
Perhaps I didn't realise at the time how important that qualifier was.
Can we go back to FUJ 0015 2573?
Before we do, Mr. Beer, I'm slightly puzzled, and it may just be me, about how this email, the one that's on the screen, begins. For your information, and then this is the response I intend to send to Graham. Read your question, if that's okay. Now, to me, that reads as if Mr. Pinder is going to send this response to Graham. if it's okay with Mr. Jenkins, because it's the question that Mr. Jenkins has asked him. Am I misreading this?
No, that's exactly right, sir, I think.
And is that consistent with the interpretation that was given to the preceding emails, which suggested that it was Mr. Pinder who was seeking to ask questions of Mr. Jenkins rather than Mr. Jenkins asking questions of Mr. Pinder? Do you see my point? It may be that I'm just misunderstanding.
So I think you may have misunderstood the first email that we looked at. If we just go down to that.
Yeah.
As I read this, there must have been an earlier email that we haven't got in which
Right.
Mr. Pinder sent that first paragraph, I've been asked by the fraud investigation team, and then the second paragraph, which says if there have been human errors, if that's marked, and then the paragraph at A, if that can be marked,
Yeah,
paragraph
but
at B, and then Mr. Jenkins has replied in the darker text.
Yeah, well, that's as I understood what you were explaining, and that did or could make sense, but it's the juxtaposition of that with the beginning of the next email that I'm struggling with. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt your questioning of Mr. Jenkins. Maybe it'll all become clear to me.
I'll try. So if we go back up to the top page, do you understand that this is Mr. Pinder saying to you, everything below the words comments from Gareth Jenkins and including the words comments for Gareth Jenkins is what I, Brian Pinder, are going to send to Greg?
Yes, I do, but it relates to, and it's just those three words, your question. And it's the other way around, isn't it? On the first two emails.
So I think what I don't want to give evidence here, but
Maybe I should just ask Mr. Jenkins. What do you think?
I think your question, my understanding is that Graham Ward had asked Brian Pinder 6 questions. He had identified one of those questions for me to respond to, namely question 6, I think it was. And therefore, what he's saying is, in response to the question that I've allocated to you, this is the answer I intend to send to Graham Ward in response to that specific question.
So your interpretation of the phrase "your question" is not that you asked the question; it's the question that he allocated to you.
Correct. That's how I understand it, and I think that's how I would have understood it at the time.
Fine. Well, then I follow. Thanks. Sorry about all that.
So that should read, I intend to send to Graham the question that has been allocated to you, if that's okay.
That is how I read it at the time, yes.
Thank you.
Fine. Then I do understand now. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go back, please, to FUJ 0015?
Before we leave that,
Yep.
Can we go down, please, to my response to the third question?
Yes, absolutely.
And
Keep going. Keep going. That's it.
Again, it said, it is a possible explanation, but without detailed analysis, it's difficult to speculate. So I think what Brian had interpreted from that, therefore I wasn't going to comment on it. And that's why I would have been happy with, I'm not happy to comment. I suspect that is probably why I was happy with that being replaced by unable to comment, because I'm speculating there, and therefore it is not a definitive answer.
Doesn't that overlook completely?
But I accept the fact that the qualification would have been useful information to have provided.
Well, doesn't it completely overlook the fact that the main point to answer to question 3 is you need to look at the data?
Yes, I accept that now, but that may well have been why I was happy to allow the change to have been made at the time.
Okay, can we go back, please, to FUJ 0015 2573? This is, if we just look at the foot of the page, Brian Pinder's document. And if we go up, please. Addressed to Graham, which is going to be Graham Ward. This is the response of Mr. Pinder He says, in response to your email request dated the 28th of November, concerning the questions raised at paragraph 3 of the above document being the Bond Pierce letter that we've looked at. You'll see the answers to question 1. Question 2, it refers to, in the answer, a response from Anne Chambers, which is attached. Then if we scroll down, please, to question 5, you'll see that the full question in 3 parts is set out, and the reply from Mr. Pinder is Gareth Jenkins' response attached. If we go to page 3, please. So this was the attachment to Mr. Pinder's document. Can you see that it's essentially his email back to you, the FYI email,
Yes,
including your signature block at the bottom, which he did in fact include in his reply to you?
Yes.
So the shortened reply has been sent back to the post office. You were able to comment, weren't you? Whereas your reply has gone back to the post office saying that you're not able to comment.
Yes.
Was the reason for that because it was thought that an investigation of what the sub-postmaster was saying might not be in Fujitsu's best interests?
I don't know what was the reason for that change. I would have been quite happy to investigate and look at exactly what had happened in the branch. And in fact, I believe at some later stage I did assist Dan in doing some investigations there.
Was the reason for the different reply that an investigation might reveal issues that Fujitsu didn't really want to speak about?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, that can come down. Now, I think you subsequently attended a conference on the 6th of June 2006 with representatives of Bond Pierce and others. Do you remember?
I remember seeing the documents about it and have vague recollections of the meeting.
Let's look at the documents, please. Poll 307-1427. We can see this is an attendance note in the case of Lee Castleton, dated the 6th of June 2006. We were previously looking, to give you some context, at November and December 2005. This is at Fujitsu's HQ in Bracknell. In attendance were, if we scroll down, solicitors, the first 3 people, then Brian Pinder, Peter Sewell, Andy, I think that's Dunks.
Yes, I think
he's called
so.
Mr. Dunce. Anne Chambers, Naomi Ellis, and you, a distinguished engineer of Fujitsu.
Yes.
I'm not going to go into the detail of this attendance note. Do you recall any discussion in this meeting about you or Anne Chambers giving evidence?
I think there was discussion about evidence being given, but I can't remember the details of it. I do know that Anne eventually ended up giving evidence in the case, and I didn't.
You remember the second page of the Bond Pierce letter, and onto the third page of the Bond Pierce letter,
Yes.
an extensive explanation of the duties of an expert.
Yes.
Do you know what had happened to that?
No idea.
Were those issues discussed at this conference?
I have no recollection of any discussion of those there. As I say, all I can vaguely remember is the fact that there was a meeting and I met a couple of solicitors.
Heard the guidance that Bond Pierce had given about the provision of expert evidence by a Fujitsu employee been forgotten by this stage?
I don't know whether it had been forgotten or what, but I don't remember any mention of it.
in any event, your recollection is that that wasn't gone over again in the context of either you or Anne Chambers giving evidence.
No.
Thank you. Can we turn to 3 days later? This is the 6th of June 2006. 3 days later to the 9th of June 2006. FUJ 0015 4722. And look at the email at the bottom part of the page. If we scroll up just so we can see from and to, thank you. From the solicitor at Bond Pierce, Stephen Dilley, to Mr. Pinder, copied to Graham Ward and Mandy Talbot. So not you at this stage.
Yep.
I'd like to thank you and your team for finding time to meet us on Tuesday. That would be the date of the conference we've just looked at. We found the meeting to be really worthwhile, helpful and productive. We'll circulate a note. In the meantime, I attach a letter received on 7th of June from Mr. Castleton's solicitors. I've highlighted the 2 paragraphs I would like you to have a look at. Basically, they state the Horizon system is equipped with a facility via which its operating software can be updated remotely via the connection to the post office's head office, and that the system sometimes went offline when there are software updates. They've therefore asked for documents relating to the updating of the software of the system. My view is they're making a stab in the dark. Please could you ask your team whether they would have or could obtain any records of software update. So this is a question about remote accessing of the system.
A sort of remote access. I think I explained different types of remote access in one of my witness statements.
We're going to come to that probably tomorrow, but a species of remote access.
Yes.
Now, if we look, please, at FUJ 0015 2605. And if we scroll down, please. And again. And again. We'll see that email, if we just scroll down a bit further. We'll see the email we've just looked at.
Yes.
And if we scroll up, please. Brian Pinder sends that on to you and Penny Thomas. I'd like to run this by you first, as I hope you might be able to answer either the query, hopefully, or point me in the right direction. And then up, please. Your reply of the 9th of June 2006, you say, it's correct, we do update software remotely, and that a software update could result in the desktop being closed and restarted. However, even then, I don't see how it will result in losses, as is being claimed. Software updates are relatively rare and normally only take place between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. and again before 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. with occasional extensions at the weekend. This puts them well outside the normal operational hours of Horizon. I think he's clutching at straws. However, I guess we do need to cover this angle. I'd expect the system to record details of all software updates and when they took place, at which branches. I don't know how long these are retained, whether they're included in the audit trail, so you can check the history from, excuse me, for Marine Drive in 2004, and then you suggest a place to start. In the provision of this information, which is a reply about a species of remote access, had the guidance in the Bond Pierce letter been drawn to your attention about the provision of expert evidence?
No. I just had the question as shown in the email trail that you're showing me.
And so that letter of the 18th of November never made its way through to you?
No, I'm sure it couldn't have done, because I would have done things differently, not necessarily in this case, but certainly in later cases, if I'd been aware of those responsibilities.
Can we move on, please, to FUJ 0015 4727? And start with page 2, please. An email from Mr. Ward to Mr. Pinder and Mr. Sewell. Can you see that?
Yep.
Stephen Dilley, representing the Post Office, is asking if it's possible that someone undertakes an analysis of figures recorded on transaction logs. It appears that the solicitors for Castleton are saying that they've compared the transaction logs with the cash accounts for week 42 themselves, and they don't match. They conclude that Horizon is therefore only recording half the transactions. And then reading second and third paragraph, given this is a test case and that the integrity of the Horizon system is being challenged, my own opinion is that this exercise should be completed by an expert, in inverted commas, from Fujitsu. However, it will obviously be extremely time-consuming, as all the figures recorded will need to be methodically and carefully analysed. It's also important we complete the analysis and respond formally to the points raised as soon as possible. My first question is, one, is this an exercise that Fujitsu could undertake, possibly by Gareth, perhaps, who would presumably have a thorough understanding of the figures recorded on both the transaction logs and the figures on an office cash account? Two, if the answer is yes, how soon could this exercise be performed and a formal response prepared? Will there be a cost? And then if we scroll up, please. We'll see there that Mr. Pinder forwards the email to you on the 31st of July, asking, is this something you can provide?
Yes.
And then if we scroll up to the top of the page, your reply of the 31st of July, I guess it is the sort of analysis that I could do if required. However, it's fairly time-consuming, and the problem is in adjusting my priorities to find the time to do it. I don't know how many transactions are involved, and I'd need copies of the cash account before and after the period to carry out the analysis. I might need to get hold of the reference data that was current at the time, which is probably quite difficult. Given the volume of the data, I'd expect this to take anything between 2 days and a week. It's difficult to tell in advance, given that I'll probably need to feel my way. I'll probably need help from Penny in carrying out extracts from the relevant message stores. For timescales, I can't spend more than a couple of hours on it this week, and probably can't start in earnest until the week of the 14th, and then I'm on leave. Anne Chambers might be able to do a similar analysis, and she might have some tools to help. She's on leave this week. So you're essentially expressing concerns about your capacity.
Yes.
By this time, had any of the guidance that we saw in the letter of the 18th of November 2005 been given to you about providing expert evidence?
I'm pretty sure it hadn't. I can't say definitively because it's so long ago, but as I say, I think I would have known if I had seen it.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 00152290? And if we scroll down, please. And you say there on the 7th of August to Mr. Sewell, in relation to the Castleton case and transaction logs, second paragraph, I've spoke with Anne this morning. We've agreed that once the CP, is that a change proposal is approved, she will carry out the initial analysis based on transactions we get from Penny. Then we will review them together, and I'll front up any report we present to the Post Office. Again, by this stage, we're now in August 2006, had the guidance given in the 18th of November 2005 letter been provided to you?
Not that I'm aware of, and I don't think that's the letter that's referred to in an earlier email that's mentioned in this email. I think that's
no, that's right.
Something different, yeah.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 00152292? 17th of August now, 2006, about Marine Drive, from Anne Chambers to you. She says, I've spent some time recalculating the CAP 42, the cash account period 42 cash account for Marine Drive and addressing the points in the letter from the solicitor. Hope it makes sense to provide you with a starting point, not quite at the very beginning. Subsequent cash accounts, if needing, should be much easier now. I have the mappings set up and some idea of what numbers need to go where. I'm now going to look at the loss made in week 42 and demonstrate it was due to the difference between system holdings and declared holdings. If this isn't at all what you wanted, please let me know. I don't really know what I'm doing. Hasn't had my full attention. Lots of people are on leave. Also, yesterday I got my witness statement, which is, as I expect you found, full of things I didn't say or do, including all those power help calls. And so Miss Chambers had been asked by you to do the work, or it had been agreed by you that she should do the work. Is that right?
Yes, as I understand it, she did the initial calculations. I think what she sent me there is a spreadsheet that she put together and a note of what she'd actually done. And I then went through and checked both her methodology and the conclusions she came to. And then I think at some later stage, I wrote it up in a slightly different form than the form that she passed it to me in.
And why were you going to, in your words, front it up, front the report?
I can't remember now. That's clearly something we'd agreed between us at the time, but I can't remember what was behind that at the time.
Can we turn to FUJ 0012-2279, please? And scroll down, please. Thank you. An email of the 2nd of August from Mr. Dilly, the solicitor, to Brian Pinder and others, not including you, with the subject first draft statement of Gareth Jenkins, and says to Mr. Pinder, I refer to our previous correspondence and attach the first draft of witness statement and exhibit for Gareth Jenkins. It's designed to explain what Horizon is, comment on Mr. Castleton's allegations about the Horizon system. I'm preparing a separate statement for Anne to follow shortly, which will deal with the call logs. Can you look at the first draft, make any changes you feel are appropriate, and answer my questions in bold italics? He'll then revise the statement with counsel. Now, if that's scrolled up, please. It's forwarded to you for your information and action.
Yep.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 0012-2283? You reply the next day at 3:30ish and say, I've had a go through this, it isn't a complete statement, and I won't have time to sort out the outstanding bits for a while. I think we probably need to get the detailed analysis done before this can be completed. I'm happy for you to send it as it is to Stephen if you like, but you may decide it isn't complete enough for that. I may be able to do some, to research some of the areas such as audit that I'm claiming ignorance of if that is required. So you're essentially saying that here's an incomplete statement, I haven't got a chance to complete it yet.
Yes.
There's still some analysis work to be undertaken.
Correct.
Again, by this stage, had the letter of the 18th of November and the expert duties points in it been drawn to your attention?
No.
Thank you, that can come down. Now, I think you were subsequently informed by Mr. Pinder that you wouldn't be required to give evidence in Mr. Castleton's case, is that right?
That is what I understand from the documents I read now, and I certainly remember I didn't give evidence.
Do you remember Mr. Pinder informing you that directly that you would not be required to give evidence in Mr. Castleton's case?
I've seen an email which effectively says that, yes.
Before the break, can we just look at that, please? FUJ 0015-4733. think this is, if we scroll down, please. And again. And again. Yeah, if we just go back to the top, please. I think, again, as was your practice, you have cut into an email the contents of Mr. Pinder's email and replied to it.
Yes.
And so the first part of the text in the two lightly shaded paragraphs is what Mr. Pinder's saying. Is that right?
That's my understanding of it,
Yeah.
and that it makes sense reading it that way.
He says, just been chasing Stephen up, re your attendance and any matters still outstanding for us. Post office account as follows, my words. He states that although you, that's you, Mr. Jenkins, would probably make a good witness, it is for evidential reasons that you cannot be called, to do with evidence of opinion, in inverted commas, expert evidence, and real evidence, etc., complicated legal issues, nothing to do with personalities. And you say, fine, I won't try to understand what this means.
Yes.
Was that the limit of the explanation that you received as to why you were not being called as a witness in the Lee Castleton case?
As far as I can remember, yes. I'm not aware of any other briefing I got given.
Did you have an understanding of what the distinctions drawn in this email between opinion and expert evidence and real evidence were?
No, hence my comment about I won't try and understand what this means.
And was that the end of it so far as you were concerned?
Yeah. As far as I was concerned, it just meant that I didn't need to be involved in the case anymore, and therefore I could get on with my day job.
You, in fact, did have continuing involvement in the case because you answered some queries.
Yes.
But you didn't give evidence.
Correct.
The references to those, I'm not going to turn them up, are FUJ 0015 4747 and POL 306 9822. In what capacity were you continuing to be involved in the case?
I believe that I was asked to do some further analysis. I can't remember now what the details were, but I've seen emails suggesting that I was asked some specific questions, which I responded to, and I think I may have produced another paper as a result of some of that investigation. But I can't remember now what I did at the time. All I can go by is the emails that the inquiry showed me.
That document can come down, thank you. You tell us in your witness statements that you didn't see Anne Chambers' afterthoughts document, either at the time or until this inquiry, essentially.
I have no memory of seeing that.
Given that the plan was that you should present the evidence which constituted the work that she had undertaken, you were going to front up the report, and then she had ended up giving evidence rather than you at trial. Did you not discuss with her how that came about?
I think it was really as part of this thing that it was a case of it had been decided that because Anne had done the original analysis, and I think she'd done the analysis, I think there may have been a call, was there, back in 2004, because I think her analysis was partly based on work that she'd actually done at the time, and therefore that was why she needed to give the evidence, because she'd actually done the original analysis, and therefore me giving evidence, just reporting what she'd told me, didn't really work. So it was something like that, but I just don't remember the details, and that was probably what I took as being behind what was shown in the last email you showed me.
Was that explained to you at the time, i.e. that Anne Chambers is the one that's been selected to give evidence because she could give some evidence of primary facts, i.e. work that she had undertaken in answering a help desk query in 2004, that's why she's the witness of choice?
I think I may have heard that at some point, but I just can't remember the details, sorry.
Did you have any discussion with her about the wider issues raised by her document?
What do you mean by why?
She was critical of the process by which she had become involved in the case.
Are you talking about the afterthoughts document?
Yes.
No.
Were you aware that she was an extremely reluctant witness?
Yes, I think I was aware she was reluctant to be a witness.
Why was she reluctant to be a witness?
I think it just took her outside her comfort zone. I think that would apply to any person really going before the legal process, and she certainly didn't feel very comfortable with it.
Did she raise with you her complaints about the manner in which she had been pulled into the case?
No, I don't believe so.
Did she raise with you her complaints about the process by which disclosure had been given?
No, I think she may have mentioned something about having something sprung on her about NT event logs being different from logs, but that's the only vague recollection I have. Because I think she have to go back about a month after the original trial to present some further evidence or something.
That's right. Is that something that you spoke about at the time with her?
I was aware that she had to go back, but and that she wasn't happy with it, but not the gory details of it.
Thank you. So that's just coming up to 12:20 now. Could we break, please, until 2:55?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins, in your, I'm going to turn to the capacity in which you gave evidence in witness statements and then orally in the Seema Misra case.
Yep.
Just as a general topic, as a theme.
Okay.
In your witness statements provided to the inquiry, on a number of occasions you explain that you were not the chief architect for Horizon, correct?
Correct.
Nor indeed a lead engineer for the post office account.
No.
And you explain that you were not the only person involved in the development of Horizon, nor the maintenance of it when it was up and running.
Correct.
Why did the post office rely on you specifically as its expert witness?
I don't know is the simple answer. I did have a fairly good overview knowledge of the whole of Horizon because of really going back to my role in the agent team, because the whole point of the agents was to sit in the middle and see the difference between what was happening at the counter and what was happening at the back end. And obviously with the work I did on Impact, I got a much more detailed knowledge of how the counter operated. So from that point of view, I probably was one of the people who had a good overview knowledge of how the Horizon system worked. But I don't think I was necessarily the only person.
Was there anyone who was a better placed witness than you?
Not necessarily. I think there was an email exchange in early 2010 when it was suggested the other names did get suggested as to being able to get involved, but in the end it was me that got picked to actually get involved.
Did you ever discuss the role that you were performing as a witness with anyone senior at Fujitsu?
They were clearly aware that I was being asked to do these things, and they accepted that it was something that needed to be done and that I could probably do it as well as others. But I don't know that we had a formal, yes, this is something that needs to be part of your job, but it sort of evolved, and it did become effectively part of my job moving forward. Did
you ever discuss with anyone senior at Fujitsu the demands being placed upon you by the post office?
Yes, because I had to see how this scheduled in with the work that I was doing, and it was felt that at the sort of level that we thought was required of the work, then it could be fitted in. But clearly now understanding what maybe I should have been doing in terms of the role of an expert, then that would have been maybe a different situation. It's difficult to speculate.
Was the focus on your capacity and the money that the post office would be charged for the work that you did?
I don't think the money came into it because the post office were paying for me regardless of what I did. So it was really a case of they could pay for me to do designs of new bits of the system, or they could pay for me to do support prosecutions, and it was really up to them. They were paying the same either way. So it didn't really make any difference, and certainly made no difference to my salary.
So was the focus then on the issues of your capacity
Yes.
rather than the nature of the function that you were being asked to perform?
Yes, I think that's probably fair.
During your involvement in the various criminal cases, did you feel under any pressure placed upon you by the Post Office or its lawyers publicly to refute any suggestion by the defence that there were issues with the reliability of Horizon?
There were certainly cases where they were trying to put words into my mouth which I didn't want to say, and I think there are examples of emails where I've said, well, I agree with what this defence statement is saying, and nothing really to add to it.
But what did you think at the time at that pressure being placed upon you by the Post Office?
I just took it as being the way these things happened. There was clearly, in some cases, things seemed to be all happening last minute, and I just assumed that's how things happened in that sort of environment.
Never mind the timing so much. I'm thinking more of people were trying to put words in your mouth.
I wouldn't allow them to put words in my mouth unless I agreed with them.
Did you raise that with anyone senior at Fujitsu?
I think I did. I certainly had conversations with David Jones back in February 2010.
He was a Post Office lawyer.
No, he was a Fujitsu lawyer.
So I meant a Fujitsu lawyer.
Yes, he was a Fujitsu lawyer. I think that was really instigated by Penny rather than myself. She felt that the Post Office were getting to be very demanding of Fujitsu in general, and me and her to some extent in particular, because not only was there the case for Mrs. Misra, there was also the case to do with Mr. Hosey going on at the same sort of time, and she felt that it was important that we had some sort of legal cover, for want of a better word, of the way that it was being approached. And so she set up this meeting with David Jones, which lasted about an hour or so, something like that, where basically what my memory came out of that is, we'll just tell the truth and what happened and get on with it, and we'll support you as you need it.
Was there any discussion there as to the capacity in which you were giving evidence?
Not that I can recall.
Was there any discussion then as to the duties that you may owe the court, given the nature of the evidence that you were providing?
No, I don't believe so.
I think it's right, isn't it, that the Post Office and its lawyers made a series of direct approaches to you on a number of occasions?
Yes, they did, and I tried to force them back into the way that they should be they should have been communicating with me through Penny and the prosecution support team, and there were a number of cases where I was approached directly, and in most of those cases I then forwarded the emails on to Penny and tried to get some sort of control back on the process.
Can we just look at some examples of those, please, Mr. Jenkins? Poll 3097138. And if we scroll down, please. There's an email underneath this one, no need to look at it for now. You reply on the 16th of November to Rachel Panter. Do you remember who she was?
She was a lawyer working for Cartwright King, I believe.
And you say, Rachel, can't you use the report I've already sent you? There's no mention of the case on the report. You should really be addressing such requests through the Post Office rather than directly to myself. As far as I know, there's no commercial cover in place for me to spend my time on such activities, and that includes the case of Nemesh Patel. And then if we scroll up, please. James Davidson, a delivery executive, says to Miss Panton, and you're copied in, sorry, Panter, I'm concerned at the engagement approach being taken here. We're fully on board to support, but all approaches must come through Post Office by the correct change process. Is this an example of you pulling the post office up on direct approaches to you.
Indeed, it was. And if you noticed on the previous email, although I'd been sent the email directly by Rachel Panter, when I responded, I copied in both Penny Thomas and James Davidson. So they were aware of the fact that I'd been approached.
And what was the issue in your mind with a direct approach from the post office?
I think, well, there's 2 or 3 issues, really. The main one was that I felt that the prosecution support team, namely Penny, needed to be aware of what was going on, and that we actually had a single point of contact, so that Fujitsu was aware of what Post Office was requiring them to do in terms of legal processes and so on.
Why?
Just so that the right people knew what was going on. And then there was separately the question of making sure that Post Office was being charged correctly for the use of time and so on. Again, the charging didn't really come down to anything to do with what I was being paid or anything like that, but I needed to be able to allocate my time so that it was being accounted for correctly.
So just going back to the first reason you gave there, or the first issue, why was it important that the Fujitsu prosecution support team were cited on these exchanges?
So that they knew what basically, so they knew what was happening. It was their responsibility. That there was supposed to be a line of communication between the post office legal department, well, not the legal department, their investigators. Jane Owen is the name that I think of in that role, and the Fujitsu team, to actually know what was going on, to coordinate the work, so to be aware of what was happening and what was going on.
What was the importance of that, though? Why was it written down somewhere that that's what had to occur?
I think it might have been, but I wasn't aware of that. But I just felt that that was the right process for doing things. I mean, my work had to be accounted for. I had management telling me what I needed to do. Having these odd requests out of the blue that were going to take up time, I needed to make sure that people were aware that these were happening and that my priorities could be allocated correctly between the various demands of my time.
Was it in your mind that a prosecutor has duties to retain, to record and to disclose material?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Was it in your mind that Fujitsu, as a third party to a prosecution, might be required to disclose material to a court?
No, I'd not thought of it that way at all, no.
Did you ever come to understand that you might owe personal duties of disclosure to a court?
Only when it was explained to me in 2020 what an expert needed to do.
Did you ever come to understand that Fujitsu may owe duties of disclosure?
No, as far as I understood it, the disclosure was something that Post Office needed to worry about, it wasn't something that affected me or Fujitsu.
What was your understanding of the Post Office's duties of disclosure?
I didn't really understand what they were, but I was aware that I was told that there had been various hearings requesting various bits of disclosure, which they seemed quite happy had gone to say that they did not need to actually disclose the things that they had been asked to disclose.
Was that in the Seema Misra case?
Yes. I wasn't concerned about the details. I was just aware that such discussions were going on in the abstract.
In any of those discussions, were the extent of Fujitsu or your own duties of disclosure discussed?
No.
Can we move forwards, please, to FUJ 0015 3986? And look at page 8, please. And if we scroll down, please. Yeah, that's excellent. An email from Jane Owen on the 16th of November 2012, which is the same day we were looking at the moment, to Penny Thomas. And copied to Jane Bradbury. That's not a name that's familiar to me. Do you remember what function she performed?
I don't recognise the name at all, I'm afraid, sorry.
Anyway, Jane Owen, security manager in the post office, says, hi Penny, I'm a little out of the loop with this now, I've changed roles. I asked Mark about raising an invoice. He has the budget to cover the expert witness requirements for one of Sharon's cases, which I think the email below will relate to. Back in April, an order was raised, but we were never invoiced. Do you know anything about that at all? Gareth has been approached directly by an external solicitor, and Jane will need to start discussions with our team leaders on how we prevent this from happening going forward, as it's clearly unacceptable that he be, quote, ambushed in this way. Did you feel that you were being ambushed by the post office?
Not
No, that's not
necessarily
the word.
I wouldn't necessarily use that word, but I mean, clearly, having this email out of the blue from Rachel Panther in November, when the last contact I'd had about any of these cases was about a month before that, was a bit of a surprise. And clearly I felt that we needed to have some sort of control as to how my work was to be scheduled and how Post Office was managing this. And I see this as being Post Office trying to actually get that some control put back in there.
But this is all about capacity and formalisation between two business partners. It's not to do with the substance of the evidence that you're to give or any procedural duties that attach to it.
No. Or sorry, yes, that's... Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct what you said, yes.
Can we move forwards, please, to poll 0022 9801? Sorry, FUJ 0022 9801. I think I said poll. Thank you. And if we can turn to page 3, please. And scroll down, please. Thank you. This is an email exchange between you and Angela van den Boogaard. Can you see that? Of January, the end of January 2013.
Yes, I see that. I don't understand the context yet, but presumably we'll get that.
To give you a bit of context, I'm not sure it's completely necessary, but if we just scroll down, please. And scroll down still further. And again. Thank you. This is about the Helen Rose report. And if you scroll up, please, now.
When you say Helen Rose report, I'm aware of two Helen Rose reports. We're talking about Lepton here.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
If we scroll up to there, thank you. I think Miss van den Boogaard is asking you questions about it.
Yes, this looks again like an email from Angela van den Boogaard to myself, where I've actually inserted with the GIJ prefix my responses to her various questions.
Yes, and if we just scroll up, please. It's the second paragraph of your reply. In the first paragraph, you say, I've added replies with Gareth, Idris, Jenkins, GIJ. In the second paragraph, you say, this is all outside of our official remit. I probably shouldn't be doing this investigation for you in this way. Though if you ask for formal help, it's likely to be me who gets involved. We saw the exchange of the previous November, where there was an attempt at formality made. Had that failed?
I'm not sure. I think It's a case of trying to understand the amount of work involved. I've been asked some specific questions. I probably spent about half an hour or an hour replying to this email, so I thought it was simpler to just reply to the email, then point out that this should really go through official channels, and that is why I'd copied Penny in on the response, because I saw her as being the official channel. So I wasn't trying to be awkward. I thought, let's just answer the question, because that's fairly straightforward. If it was going to take me a long amount of time, then I would have just said, let's get this sorted out officially.
Why was it outside your official remit?
Because my job is designing new changes to the system, not answering questions from random people in Post Office.
Why did you answer random questions from people in Post Office?
Because I felt I could actually answer them, and I felt that if it did go through the official channels, it would probably be me that would end up being asked about them. I think at this stage I may have already had some sort of contact with Helen Rose about this, but I can't remember exactly the chronology.
By this time, you'd already raised a red flag, so to speak, in November
Yes.
about direct contact, but you were perpetuating it here.
Yes.
Do you adopt an informal, trying to help approach?
I try and be helpful when I can, yes, but I'm aware that I also need to try and put some sort of control in, which is why I copied Penny in on this, to make her aware that I was being asked these sort of questions.
Because, of course, you don't know what's going to be done with what you said in your earlier email, do you? i.e. the use to which it's going to be put?
No.
Can we move on? That can come down, please. You tell us in your third witness statement a series of things. I'm going to try and summarise them about your approach when giving evidence. Firstly, would this be right, that you gave evidence without an understanding that you might be an expert witness in the legal sense?
Correct.
And that you were therefore lacking an understanding that you were subject to the duties imposed upon an expert witness, including duties of disclosure?
Correct.
And you tell us in your witness statements that you lacked that understanding in Miss Misra's case, that's paragraphs 233 and 329 of your third witness statement, Mr. Allen's case, paragraph 619, and in Miss Sefton and Miss Neald's case, paragraph 689.
Correct.
The second thing, and again I'm trying to summarise a large body of text here, is this right? You say you were never provided with written instructions to be an expert witness in any case in which the Post Office asked you to give evidence.
Correct.
And that includes in Mr. Thomas's case, para 313, Miss Misra's case, para 329, Mr. Allen's case, para 619, Miss Sefton and Miss Neald's case, para 689, and Mr. Ishak's case, paragraphs 643 and 646.
Correct.
Thirdly, is this right? You say that you were not informed on how to interact with a defence expert or to prepare a joint statement with another expert.
Correct.
And that applied in both Miss Misra's case, para 478, and Mr. Ishak's case, para 666.
Correct.
And fourthly, you say that you were never asked by the Post Office to provide a witness statement that contained an expert witness's declaration.
Correct.
That applied in Miss Misra's case, paragraphs 233, 466 and 483, Mr. Allen's case, para 619, Miss Sefton and Miss Neald's case, para 689, and Mr. Ishak's case, para 669.
Correct.
You tell us in your witness statement, it's your third witness statement, about circumstances in which you asked for guidance in the run-up to Seema Misra's trial as to what was expected of you as a witness.
Yes.
By that time, had you suffered from a lack of confidence in the management of the requests coming from the Post Office?
Well, they were certainly fairly chaotic, a number of the emails I was getting, and I was certainly aware that I was getting asked the same question multiple times, having already answered questions, and there was even some occasions when I responded saying, well, here's the email I sent you yesterday answering the same question. So, yes, I could see that, that there was a lack of organisation, is maybe a polite way of putting it, in terms of the way that things were being managed.
The email exchange that you had, I'm not going to go to it now, we'll go to it later, when you asked for guidance, what's expected of me as an expert witness, and you got a rather sort of asinine reply, didn't you?
I can't remember that particular email, but that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, you just got to tell the truth.
Yeah.
That one.
That's going back to, that was Mr. Thomas's case, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Were you concerned about that, the basic nature of the reply that you got, the lack of guidance that you received?
I just took it at face value, I think, rather than questioning it. If I just have to tell the truth, then I'd do that anyway, so that wasn't really telling me anything new.
Why do we not see you asking any of your own managers at Fujitsu for assistance in this regard? I'm being dragged into court proceedings here. Please help me as to what is required of me.
I thought I was being told what was required of me by post office, so I didn't really understand that I wasn't being told the right thing. So I just trusted what I was being asked by post office and didn't see the need to involve my management. They were clearly aware that I was spending time doing these sort of things, but I didn't feel that I needed any further guidance from them, in that I thought what I'm looking for is guidance about legal things, therefore I'm probably get it better from the lawyers that I'm talking to in post office than managers in Fujitsu who know more about the law than I do.
But you got no guidance from the post office?
Well, I realise that now. I thought I was getting some sort of guidance, but it probably wasn't very good guidance.
What guidance did you think you were getting from the post office at the time?
Tell the truth. To complete a witness statement.
Why do we not see you asking the lawyers at Fujitsu, with whom you did correspond relatively frequently, for greater support and guidance on the role that you were to perform?
I think that came after about 2010, sort of in Mrs. Misra's case, and I did seek guidance from David Jones, and I had that meeting with him in February, and for a while then he actually acted as a buffer between me and post office lawyers and so on. Then later on I was involved with Jean-Pierre, who did give me a bit of further guidance, but not the true guidance that maybe I should have had in terms of what an expert duties were.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 0015-2866? And if we scroll down, please. Thank you. An email exchange between you and David Jennings. Who was David Jennings?
I'm not quite sure. Reading the context of that email, I think he was someone within customer service, but I can't remember exactly what his role was. I don't recall the name at all now, I'm afraid. This looks to be to do with booking time and concerned about what time I was charging to post office for activities in support of Penny.
So again, this is one of those emails where you set out his questions and then answer them.
Yes.
And you say, Dave, in response to your questions, and then his question is, I understand you act from time to time to support prosecution activity, sort of an expert witness, I suppose. I have a few initial questions on this. And then stopping there, he describes you as sort of an expert witness. Did you regard yourself as a sort of expert witness?
Well, I was clearly an expert in how Horizon operated, and that's what I assumed that meant. I didn't understand what its meaning was in the legal sense, and didn't until about 2020.
He says, how frequent is this typically, and how much notice is there? You say it's ad hoc. Tend to have various questions from Penny a couple of times a month. How much effort? It varies. Where do you book the time? And then you say, I have a code for prosecution support, and you give the codes? Does anyone else in requirements do this activity? You explain and say you're not sure how they book their time. Is there anyone else who should cover this activity as well, or instead of you? And you answer should, then yes, could, then probably no. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think what I was suggesting is that maybe someone should be formally performing this sort of role, but I was also accepting the fact that I was probably in the best position to actually do that. But I certainly didn't want it as a full-time job because I was enjoying myself doing the design work that was my day job, if you like. So I was seeing this as something that I was fitting in on the side between that. So that's really what I was trying to summarise there.
This seems to be focused on the commercial aspects of the arrangement, whether there's appropriate commercial coverage.
Yeah, and I think that must have been Dave Jennings' role, was looking at the commercials of it, because I think it comes back to say that I'd spent about a week on it over the past year or something like that.
Was there any equivalent set of exchanges over the basis on which you were giving evidence, or your status when you were giving evidence?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Were there any exchanges internally with Fujitsu, to your knowledge, over the status of your evidence?
You mean in terms of whether I was an expert or not? Not that I'm aware of. As I say, what usually happened is if there was going to be some sort of engagement of my time for a particular case, then they would arrange with Post Office to have some sort of commercial cover for a number of days of my time, and if necessary that would get extended so that I had something to book the time against. But exactly how those, I left that really to Penny to sort out. As long as I had a time code to book to on a Friday afternoon, then that was all I was really worried about.
Can we look lastly before the lunch break at poll 3097123? And look at page 9, please. And scroll down. And scroll down. And scroll down. Thank you. Email from Miss Jennings. This case, that's Patel, is due for trial. Can you please put this in the diary and scroll up, please? You reply, I'm not aware of this case or what might be required of me. I'm not aware of any other outstanding cases which I might be involved in, and scroll up. Reply from Sharon Jennings. Gareth, this is the one you supplied the expert report and witness statement for the week before last. Apologies for not explaining that properly in the previous email. It was a blanket email for all witnesses. It's unclear at this stage who will be required as witnesses and which evidence will be accepted without the need for attendance. I just thought if I let everyone know, I can pencil it in and then I can let you know nearer the time. Again, there's a reference there to you supplying an expert report. Did that trigger anything in you?
No, because as far as I was concerned, what an expert report meant was a report by someone who understood what Horizon was about.
Okay. And then if we scroll up, please. You say, thanks for the clarification. If I'm required to go to court, I need some more background on the specific case and exactly what's being alleged. I appreciate that it's not covered by my, I appreciate that is not covered by my statement. But if I need to be an expert witness, I need to understand what is happening. In what sense were you referring to yourself as an expert witness there?
Again, as an expert on how Horizon operated.
Not quite how it reads, is it?
I just didn't understand the concept of an expert in the legal sense because I've got no legal background or training.
Thank you. So that's an appropriate moment. Can we take the break until 2 o'clock, please?
Yes. So we'll resume at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.